Not too long ago, we looked at some of the best WWE debuts in company history, but this time we're going to look at some of the worst while opening the floor up to all wrestling promotions. This time I'm also going to be a bit more loose in regards to what counts as a debut. For example, I'll include in-ring debuts even if the wrestler was seen on TV via pre-taped videos or promos. It can be gimmick repackages, it can be a wrestler debuting in a new company, things like that. I've already shortlisted a ton of good debuts based around the comments you guys posted in the previous best debuts video, so please use the comment section to share some of your favourite worst debuts and I'll put together round 2 in the near future. With all that out of the way, let's begin with a debut that's going to make your blood run cold. Glacier. Oh, Glacier. This debut isn't necessarily based on Raymond Lloyd's performance in the ring when he first showed up. It's more about how long it took him to show up after WCW had hyped the character up for a total of 5 months. During WCW television broadcasts that even extended beyond their Monday Nitro show, videos would air that said our world was about to change. A portal would open up and the words "blood runs cold" would get displayed on the screen. Week after week these videos would air and fans would just have to guess exactly what they meant while hoping the answer would get revealed the following week. The reveal was supposed to happen sometime in July 1996, but due to the NWO forming at Bash at the Beach that year, the debut of Glacier was put on ice. Put on ice. And fans had to endure even more pre-taped videos until the debut actually happened. To be fair, near the end, WCW did reveal what the videos were about before Glacier wrestled on TV. A few videos were made that showed the character off as he performed karate moves on top of Elsa's ice castle, and it was during these promos when fans realised that Glacier was nothing more than a Sub-Zero ripoff. He was clearly inspired by Mortal Kombat. This didn't bode well for Raymond's future, seeing as WCW had seemingly cracked the code by presenting reality-based storylines, and seeing as the NWO was the catalyst for WCW beating the WWF in the television ratings, the outlook for our frosty friend didn't look terribly good. Still, he had a place on WCW programming for sure. There has to be something for everyone on Nitro every week. Only he didn't debut on Nitro, he debuted on WCW Pro. On the September 9th, 1996 episode of WCW Pro, Glacier defeated the Gambler. So after literal months of build-up, a vast majority of fans didn't even see the debut due to Pro not being available in as many markets as Nitro. Those who did care about the character probably learnt about his debut through word of mouth. So it's a case of Bischoff having this grand idea in his head, but he clearly let it fizzle out when he signed some bigger stars. Glacier was unique though, his entrance was good, and inside the ring there was no one on the WCW roster who wrestled the way he did. The build up to his debut was completely botched though, and it went on for way too long. Rob Van Dam was a big player in the world of pro wrestling, and anyone would have been happy to have him on their roster. TNA signed Van Dam in 2010 and he made his debut as a mystery opponent for Sting on the March 8th episode of Impact, and everything about this debut was bad except for the pop RVD got when his initial showed up on the big screen. Earlier in the evening, Sting turned heel when he attacked Hulk Hogan in Abyss, and Sting made his way out to the ring to face a mystery opponent who would turn out to be Mr. Monday Night. Van Dam appeared from the audience and he beat Sting in around 10 seconds after a top rope kick followed by the Rolling Thunder, and then Sting beat the crap out of RVD with his baseball bat. This wasn't just a few shots to get revenge. Sting beat RVD up quite a bit here after Mike Tenay called Van Dam the hottest free agent in pro wrestling just minutes prior. Hulk Hogan then shows up looking for some revenge for earlier on. Bubba the Love Sponge, of all people, tries to hold Hulk back. Sting ends up attacking Hulk again with his baseball bat, so in actuality, RVD ended up the least important person in this whole debacle. I read somewhere that Hogan missed his cue and he was supposed to come down to the ring a lot earlier, hence why RVD took such a sustained beating from Sting, but I don't even know if that's true or not. In the end, Van Dam looked like a chump. This was more about Sting and Hulk Hogan, and what should have been a great moment for TNA turned into another miserable showcase as they tried to take on WWE Raw every Monday night. This one highlights how the WWF's pettiness not only hurt themselves but also screwed around with fan expectations. creating one giant disappointment while simultaneously making the WWF, Vince McMahon and even Jim Ross look incredibly stupid. Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, who played the Diesel and Razor Ramon characters in WWF respectively, showed up in WCW, and pro wrestling as a whole was never the same again. The night Kevin Nash returned to WCW was the first night that the fabled 83-week win streak began, and along with Scott Hall, these two outsiders became the talk of the wrestling world. Showing how petty-minded they really were, the WWF felt Scott and Kevin were acting way too much like their trademark WWF characters when they jumped over to WCW. They weren't happy with how they were being portrayed as WWF invaders, and the WWF took WCW to court over Nash and Hall being what the WWF perceived to be rip-off characters that they created. In an effort to cool the lawsuit down, the Outsiders had to announce live on WCW pay-per-view that they did not represent the WWF and they weren't sent by the WWF to invade WCW. You really would have thought this would have been enough to put the issue to bed, but no. Just to make a point and to prove they own the intellectual property of their characters, the WWF made two other wrestlers cosplay as Razor Ramon and Diesel, and you can only imagine how this went down on TV. The WWF had turned Jim Ross heel and he promised to deliver something that even Vince McMahon couldn't deliver: the return of Diesel and the return of Razor Ramon. This was fascinating at the time, as Hall and Nash were being featured on Nitro every week, and even Eric Bischoff was worried that Scott and Hall were pulling a fast one on WCW, even going as far as to make them sign new contracts. The fake Razor and Diesel were spotted briefly during the In Your House Man Games pay-per-view, but only from behind, and Jim Ross promised to deliver Razor Ramon the very next night on Raw, followed by Diesel. So Rick Bogner walked out on Raw dressed up in Scott's Razor Ramon gear. He got in the ring where Razor's famous pyro went off. He tried to put on Razor's accent, which just sounded absolutely terrible, and fans hated it. They absolutely hated it. It made the WWF look second rate. It made the fans feel like the WWF had screwed them over. Jim Ross looked idiotic for promising something that he obviously couldn't deliver. And then there's poor Rick Bogner, who's just been stuck with the worst job imaginable. The fake Diesel showed up the next week. Glenn Jacobs tried to do his best Kevin Nash impression while failing to realise that Nash's look was one of the key ingredients that made him so popular. And yeah, through all of this, the WWF came out looking way worse, while WCW and the NWO continued to dominate in the TV ratings every week. A giant swing and a miss here that makes you wonder what on earth Vince McMahon was thinking. Bizarrely, the fake Razor Ramon and fake Diesel were also kept on TV for quite some time. They lasted about 4 months when they shouldn't have even lasted 4 minutes. Matt Sydal has a seriously decorated career that's still going to this very day. He's won championships in over 10 different promotions with stops in New Japan, Dragon Gate, Ring of Honor, TNA, WWE and loads more. The guy's seasoned, he knows his way around the ring, but unfortunately he botched pretty badly when he made his debut for AEW. Matt was a surprise entrant in the Casino Battle Royal. He got a great reaction as he made his way down to the ring. He then went up for a shooting star press and, well, as you can see, it didn't work out. You can only imagine how the poor guy felt after this happened, and keep in mind it was seriously uncharacteristic for Matt to mess up top rope moves like this. He's an incredible high flyer, so it begs the question, how did this happen? Well, Matt said he could give a million excuses, but he didn't want to do that. He did allude to the smoke around the entranceway as a potential reason for the botch, but Matt was just relieved that he got his arm out on time to stop his whole body rotating. He has a history of neck issues, and this could have been a lot worse. He managed to pick himself up and he got back in the match. AEW didn't give up on him after the mistake. You have to put this one down as a freak accident, seeing his match jumped off the ropes probably thousands of times, but yeah, not the best way to make your company debut. This is a gimmick debut, not a wrestler debut. Dustin Runnels had already wrestled in WCW and he made quite a lot of noise with his controversial Goldust character in the WWF. But his Seven character was just, I don't know, it was really something else. Many wrongfully say that the whole Seven idea came from Vince Russo, which isn't true at all. It was Russo who came up with the idea of Dustin tearing the gimmick apart on live TV, but the initial Seven character didn't come from Vince. When the 7 vignettes aired on TV, WCW was having severe problems in regards to management. Eric Bischoff had been removed from power and Bill Bush was overseeing a creative committee that seemingly didn't have much direction. They were kinda picking up the pieces of ideas Eric Bischoff had left behind or trying to carry on with storylines and angles that were already established when Eric was fired. One of these ideas was Seven, a creepy dude portrayed by Dustin Runnels who would legitimately visit children at their bedroom windows in the middle of the night. I'm not making this up. By the time Dustin was about to bring the character to arenas across America, Vince Russo had taken over as the new head of creative. Vince didn't have the same enthusiasm for the Seven gimmick as those who came before him, so instead Russo made Dustin go out on live TV while dressed up in his new outfit, and Dustin was instructed to tear his new character apart. Dustin said Goldust almost ruined his career, and WCW's answer to this was to dress him up like Uncle Fester all year long. He called the new gimmick an embarrassment to the Rhodes name, and he told the powers that be that they could stick Seven up their asses. To be fair, the character did look terrible, and to his credit, Vince Russo was the one who stopped it from going any further. But the debut was really something else. It was practically a WCW superstar coming down to the ring to announce that the company's ideas were terrible. It didn't do WCW any favours, and it sure didn't do Dustin any favours either. Edge's in-ring debut on Monday Night Raw went pretty badly due to Edge's opponent suffering a serious injury. Edge's arrival had been hyped up for weeks, not a lot was known about this guy, and even Adam Copeland said he had no idea what he was supposed to be when filming his debut vignettes for WWF TV. But he finally had his debut match on the June 22nd, 1998 episode of Raw, and he faced Jose Estrada in his televised WWF debut. Not even a minute into the match, Edge flips over the top rope and he lands on Estrada. Estrada doesn't move and the referee has no choice but to count out Edge's opponent. This obviously wasn't the planned finish for the match, and for a while it was feared that Jose Estrada had suffered from a broken neck. In the end, it was severe nerve damage, still nothing to take lightly by any means. And you can see Edge looking very concerned as Estrada stays on the outside. There's also a look of disappointment when Edge gets awarded the win. There's nothing he can do at that very moment in time but to accept that his debut didn't go as planned. And Edge said he felt like, and I quote, Edge felt like a bag of prison ass after this match took place. He felt absolutely rotten. Edge also said he knew the WWF had confidence in him and they wanted to build him up early as a star, what with all the vignettes they'd recorded, but he felt like he let everyone down while also being very worried about his opponent's well-being. Bret Hart's WCW debut, it's like having a million great possibilities and choosing one of the worst possible. The Hitman was the talk of the world after the WWF Montreal screwjob. The guy had endured one of the realest things that ever happened in pro wrestling, and he was going to debut in the WWF's rival promotion a few weeks later. How does WCW capitalise on this absolute gift from the gods? How does WCW take the biggest story of the year and use it to make their company better? They bring Bret Hart out on Nitro and they announce he's gonna be a special referee. A special referee in an upcoming Starrcade match between Eric Bischoff and Larry Zbyszko. The reason for this? Well, Bret says he knows what it's like to get screwed over by a referee, and therefore he was the right man to officiate this match. A match where the future of WCW Nitro was on the line. I'm 100% positive that you, yes you watching this video, could come up with 5 or 10 better ways to introduce Bret to WCW audiences. It's truly baffling that Bischoff would waste this golden opportunity on something so flat and uninspired. Yes, Bret did get involved in the Starrcade main event when he officiated the closing moments of the match, but that was terrible too, and Hart's momentum sunk quicker than the Titanic when Starrcade 97 was said and done. Did Bret ever recover? Some of the ideas WCW had for Bret were okay. I know it's not popular to say, but he had a few good things going for him at certain times, but admittedly, these were few and far between. The arrival of the fake Razor Ramon and fake Diesel proves that imitation isn't necessarily the most sincere form of flattery. It also proved that wrestling companies didn't really care about conning their fan bases, but the WWF aren't the only organisation who indulged in such tactics. When Big Van Vader made an alliance with Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan needed some backup, and that backup came in the form of the ultimate surprise. It was in March of 1995 when Hogan said those words on WCW TV, and naturally, fans instantly thought of the Ultimate Warrior. Jim Hellwig hadn't been seen in the WWF for quite some time. His name was mentioned on Mean Gene's hotline, and the only way fans could see this ultimate surprise was by, of course, purchasing a WCW pay-per-view, Uncensored 95. The reveal did indeed happen. Hogan was about to get jumped by Flair and Vader. A rip-off of the Ultimate Warrior's WWF music played in the arena, and fans were initially excited when that music played. When the Renegade ran down to the ring instead of the Ultimate Warrior, those cheers quickly died down, and fans realised they'd just been hoodwinked. Now, of course, WCW didn't flat out say Warrior was going to debut, but it still comes across as a real dirty tactic to get people to buy their pay-per-view. And when you remember, especially in WCW, that Hulk Hogan isn't the type of guy to give the rub to a young newcomer, you quickly realise that this was just a big old scam just to make people buy the show. WCW at least kept the Renegade around for a bit, and he was even able to beat Arn Anderson for the TV title, but as time went on, the character was relegated to jobber status, and months after being released, Richard Wilson, the man who portrayed the character, decided to end his own life due to severe depression. It's a terribly sad story all in all, and you know, we can't really say if Richard was promised the world before making his debut, but I'm sure he felt his career was on the right path by being associated with Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage. The debut was terrible, though the Renegade wasn't great nor good in the ring, and this one proves that certain wrestling companies would do absolutely anything if it meant getting a few extra pay-per-view buys, including viewing their fans as a bunch of idiots. Just over 3 years after the Renegade debuted, WCW were able to sign the actual real Ultimate Warrior. Jim Hellwig was coming into the company to have a match against Hollywood Hogan, and the history between these two would be used as the driving force behind their reignited rivalry. WCW tried their best to keep this one under wraps. The Warrior did receive a good reaction when he came out on Nitro to face his old enemy and friend, but things took a bad turn when Warrior grabbed the microphone. Now, there's nothing wrong with long promos. As a matter of fact, I prefer long promos so long as it has substantial content that serves a meaningful purpose. The Warrior, unfortunately, had really nothing substantial to say, and very little of what he did say was meaningful. As a matter of fact, he blubbered on so long that people lost their excitement mid-promo. You could sum it up all pretty quickly. Warrior was disappointed that Hogan turned to the dark side. Warrior wrestled a great man at WrestleMania 6, but now Hogan's lowered himself by leading the NWO. Warrior doesn't feel that Hogan's claims of building pro wrestling as we know it has any validity. So these two are going to clash again, and Warrior's going to do exactly what he did last time, beat Hogan in the middle of the ring. Next week, Warrior's going to start a revolution of some description, but that's your hook right there to tune into Nitro for next week. And yeah, that's about it really. Warrior blubbered on so much that the promo went on for a staggering 13 minutes. And yes, by all means, milk the debut of the Ultimate Warrior for all it's worth, but you don't need to have him speak for so long. A stare down without either man saying a word would have been equally, if not more, effective. You can see Bischoff getting agitated too as the promo goes on. He knows Warrior's going way over his allotted time, but Warrior doesn't seem to care. I know there are some folks out there who actually enjoy this one, but for me, it's way too long-winded, and it does bring the excitement levels down the more it goes on. Sometimes it's best to just keep your mouth shut. I think there's a perception nowadays that WWF fans of the late 80s and early 90s kinda accepted anything they saw on TV as good. Like, it didn't take much in-ring talent or many deep storylines to keep folks happy. There may be an element of truth to this, seeing as wrestling's evolved an incredible lot since then, but there are multiple instances of fans rejecting things that the WWF presented to them during this era. One of the best examples would be the Gobbledy Gooker, because when this giant turkey hatched at the 1990 Survivor Series in Hartford, Connecticut, fans instantly showed their displeasure. They booed the Gobbledy Gooker out of the arena, and poor Hector Guerrero had to continue the act like it was all going really well. This one was also teased for weeks. No one knew what was inside the egg, and rumours were circulating about what it could be. When you tease something like this, especially during this era, you better deliver something good because expectations are naturally going to be very high. The egg hatched, Mean Gene had to act all surprised. Fans instantly booed the Gobbledy Gooker. Roddy Piper on commentary said the turkey had won the heart of Hartford. Gorilla Monsoon called the reveal a big smash, and the mascot disappeared after a few weeks. That being said, the WWE would sometimes use the Gobbledy Gooker for cheap laughs. The character would get brought back every now and then for its comedy value or lack thereof. One of the company's biggest flops for sure, and one that'll live on in pro wrestling lore forever. The Dungeon of Doom had a big surprise for Hulk Hogan at Halloween Havoc 95. A big spooky jabroni that broke out of a block of ice live on Monday Nitro. Yeah, Nitro in the pre-NWO days sure was interesting. Hogan went on to Halloween Havoc where he murdered the Giant after their Monster Truck Sumo match. The Giant got some Phoenix down or something and he was brought right back to life. Giant and Hogan had a main event match at the pay-per-view. The Giant won thanks to Jimmy Hart stabbing the Hulkster in the back. And then a mummy walked down to the ring. A mummy that Tony Schiavone called the Yeti. And the Yeti! Tony's way of saying Yeti was the least tragic thing about this whole debacle, unfortunately, is the Yeti got in the ring to hump Hogan from the rear while the Giant took care of all the front action. Why is the Yeti dressed like a mummy? Why is he humping Hulk Hogan? Why is he even here, seeing as the match has already ended? Well, World War III was going to be WCW's next pay-per-view, and the original idea was to have 3 giants inside each of the 3 rings. This can even be seen during the opening video for the pay-per-view. The Yeti was going to serve as one of these giants, but still, all this doesn't take away from the fact that the debut was absolutely atrocious. After Halloween season ended, the Yeti became a giant ninja. The stupid costumes then came off and we got Big Ron Studd. And after leaving WCW and coming back, Ron Reese used his real name when he joined Raven's flock, albeit with a different spelling of his surname. Finally, it's the one you've been expecting from the very start, the Shockmaster, the most shocking debut in pro wrestling history. Clash of the Champions 24, August 18th, 1993, Daytona Beach, Florida. Ric Flair's holding one of his Flair for the Gold segments, and we're all going to find out who Sting and Davey Boy are bringing on to face Vader, Sid and Harlem Heat in the 1993 War Games match at Fall Brawl. Sting says this guy's going to shock us all, and yeah, he certainly did that when the pyro went off and he fell through a cheap wall. It's one of those clips we've seen so many times now, but it never loses its comedy value. The way the mask comes off and the way poor Fred Ottman has to scramble to put it back on, the way Ole Anderson can't keep it together while trying to be the voice of the Shockmaster, the way Davey Boy and Harlem Heat laugh at this unfortunate soul trying to stand up and get back into character, it's an all-timer right here that still makes me laugh every time I see it, though unfortunately the WWE Network versions muted some of the audio. There's a great episode of WWE Legends of Wrestling where Dusty Rhodes talks about the Shockmaster's debut. If you want to look it up, it's the worst characters episode. And seeing Dusty laugh about the whole thing while recalling young Cody watching at home and being surprised that Uncle Fred was under the Shockmaster's Stormtrooper helmet, it's all absolute gold. Do check it out when you get a chance. Dusty said he was laughing so hard that they had to take him back to his room. Fantastic. Let me know your favourite disastrous debuts in the comment section and I'll soon put together round 2. As mentioned, I'm using your suggestions for the next best debuts video, so if there's something you want to see covered, please let me know. I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. Thank you for choosing Wrestling Bios, even though you had a lot more choice. You can do me a solid by liking the video and subscribing to the channel, and please take care. Over the past lot of years, WWE made a lot of questionable decisions that hurt the company's standing, particularly with old school fans. I know a lot of you guys who watch my channel clocked out before or during the Ruthless Aggression era, and some of you even stuck around a little later than that, but believe me when I say things would get a whole lot worse for WWE as time went on. Don't get me wrong either, there's still some excellent matches to be found in the modern era, and the talent pool in terms of in-ring ability is of a seriously high quality. But you'd be lying to yourself if you said the creative decisions and storylines matched the abilities of the superstars who played them out. There's been a remarkable change since Triple H took over though, and there's still a lot of excitement right now about what's next for WWE, and it's awesome to see. But there wouldn't be a need for such excitement if WWE didn't screw up over and over again in the years leading up to Vince McMahon's departure. One of the best examples I can give is going to be the subject of our video today: Seth Rollins versus Bray Wyatt at Hell in a Cell 2019. A match that fans completely rejected when all was said and done, a match that made fans chant for refunds, and a match that not only hurt the competitors inside the ring, but it also hurt the whole concept of Hell in a Cell matches. Again, I understand that most of my viewers haven't followed WWE in years, so let me set things up so you can truly appreciate how ridiculous this all was. Seth Rollins, in my opinion, is currently one of WWE's best pure wrestlers. Great on the mic and even better in the ring, Seth has been seriously impressive in WWE since his arrival on the main roster with his Shield buddies. A former ROH World Champion, the first ever NXT Champion, PWI Wrestler of the Year, Royal Rumble winner, Money in the Bank winner, two-time Universal Champion, two-time WWE Champion, US title, IC title, Tag Team title, and the best thing about this is there's many who believe that Seth's yet to hit the prime years of his wrestling career. 2019 couldn't have started better for Rollins. He won the Royal Rumble by eliminating Braun Strowman at the very end, getting an insanely good reaction in the process. And he went on to WrestleMania 35 where he slayed the Beast Brock Lesnar in the Mania opening match, giving Seth his first run with the Universal Championship. Seth would drop the belt to Lesnar after Brock cashed in his Money in the Bank contract, but at SummerSlam a month later, Seth regained the championship. Seth was riding high as a babyface before Hell in a Cell 2019, and even if he was a little cocky and a little overconfident at times, fans still loved him. Seth Rollins is one of those talents, in my opinion, that you're gonna appreciate whether he's a heel or a babyface. He's so good at what he does that you're gonna be entertained either way. He also has an old school mentality about match psychology. He gets it, so yeah, needless to say, I'm a big fan of Seth Rollins, and as a side note, after everything he's already accomplished, I truly believe that the best is yet to come. Bray Wyatt, without question, was and still is one of the best original characters that's appeared on modern WWE television. Bray made an impact when he, Eric Rowan and Luke Harper debuted on the main roster in July 2013, and fans were instantly captivated by this Wyatt family. Bray's character initially had subtle supernatural elements to it, but nothing was excessively unbelievable. Much of his character work was a lot more psychological than flat out scary, but the mysterious backwoods origins of the Wyatt family sure did make things creepy and a little disturbing in the best way possible. Bray would also cut some fascinating promos that you could honestly make a full-blown case study of. No joke, I'm surprised someone hasn't done this already. He would build his own world with nothing but a dark room, a light, and the words that came out of his mouth. He would often leave fans with the impression that there's more to his world than what we truly understand, and all of this lore and mythology that he built up would open up the doors for some serious character evolution opportunities if and when necessary. Fans, quite simply, couldn't get enough. The heel Bray Wyatt was still cheered by fans because his character felt different. He's a guy who, if he wanted to, could get away with cutting promos for months without wrestling and fans would still love him. And it's rare to find someone like that, especially in modern times when everything seems to be judged on in-ring work rate rather than actual characters. As we moved forward, a lot more supernatural elements got added to Bray's character and things would get seriously amped up as time went on. Admittedly, sometimes this wouldn't be universally well received, and in my opinion, the more psychological aspect of Bray Wyatt was always more intriguing than the pure horror stuff. But fans who enjoyed the more sinister side of Bray Wyatt would get treated big time in 2019. In April 2019, fans would witness a big character evolution for Bray Wyatt. Bray would host vignettes from the Firefly Funhouse, a place Bray said he saw in his dreams, and a place where all Fireflies can feel safe. Now, I don't want to get into all this too much because I want to cover the entire Firefly Funhouse at a later date because there's just so much to talk about. But it was thanks to Bray Wyatt that this whole thing worked out as well as it did. Had someone else been tasked with talking to puppets and portraying many different characters for this Funhouse show, it could have been an absolute disaster. But this was all Bray's idea, and it worked because Bray knew he could make it work. Bray said at the end of the first Funhouse vignette that he would light the way. All the viewers had to do was let him in. And as time went on, we would find out it wasn't necessarily Bray Wyatt who wanted to be let in, but it was his alter ego, a very dark, violent, and disturbing entity known as the Fiend. Again, I'm skipping over a lot here. This is all about the Hell in a Cell match, but I will be revisiting this topic soon, so apologies for the generalization for now. Finn Balor became the first target for the Fiend, and Balor ended up taking a quick loss at SummerSlam. The Fiend then went on the attack by taking out guys like Kurt Angle, Jerry Lawler, and Mick Foley, and quite simply, fans couldn't get enough. Of course, you will find viewers who didn't think much of this, just like any character that's put on WWE TV, but the overall response was way more positive than negative. Bray was already great before, and there are those who also prefer the old Bray Wyatt in comparison to this new Fiend character, but either way, it didn't matter. Bray Wyatt had created a buzz, and the Fiend was one of the most intriguing and interesting things WWE had put on TV for a very long time in terms of strict character work and character development. What's more, this was all right out of the gate. In only a few short months, Bray Wyatt, the Firefly Funhouse, and the Fiend had become extremely popular, so the future looked extremely bright for this new WWE villain. Kinda makes you wonder why they wouldn't let things simmer for a bit instead of putting the Fiend in a title match at October's Hell in a Cell pay-per-view. The Fiend set his sights on Seth Rollins by attacking the Universal Champion at the Clash of the Champions show. This attack leads us to believe that Bray Wyatt wants a shot at the championship, and therein lies the first problem. The Fiend was absolutely unstoppable at this point, almost to the point where he just couldn't feel pain. Getting the Fiend to stay down for a 3 count almost seemed like a joke when you saw this guy completely tearing through people on TV. If the Fiend was getting a title shot then, quite simply, he couldn't lose. And as for Seth Rollins, well, putting Seth in a match against the Fiend could potentially damage his standing as a babyface because, let's not beat around the bush here, the Fiend was more popular than Seth Rollins even though Seth was a babyface. When it was announced that these two would face each other in a Hell in a Cell match, fans immediately thought WWE had booked themselves in a corner, and no matter who won the match, the outcome was going to have a detrimental effect. But in saying that too, many fans simply couldn't envision the Fiend losing in a Hell in a Cell match, and therefore fans were already getting prepared for a Bray Wyatt title run. Keep in mind that a title win for the Fiend would also mean a title loss for the Fiend down the road. It's kinda like when they put the strap on Goldberg in WCW, ironically enough, we'll come back to this in a moment. Still, the 1 month build up to Hell in a Cell was pretty good. Seth was clearly afraid of the Fiend, and anytime the Fiend showed up, Rollins would just freeze. Not once during the entire build-up did Seth do anything to hurt Wyatt both physically and mentally, so it really did feel like the champion was heading into this Cell match as the underdog. Over the course of a few weeks, Bray Wyatt would intimidate both Seth and viewers at home with his antics in the Firefly Funhouse. He would screw around with the video feed, he would surprise viewers with quick Fiend appearances here and there. In the week just before Hell in a Cell, Seth would once again take the mandible claw as fans went crazy. It all added to this feeling that Rollins simply couldn't beat the Fiend, and if he did, then all these attacks, all this fear, and all this work would be for nothing. The Fiend would just be like everyone else, and his attempts at being so intimidating in the future could potentially get watered down. The Hell in a Cell, admittedly, has lost a lot of its intimidation factor since its introduction in 1997. I'm not going to harp on here about the first Hell in a Cell match because I'm sure you guys are sick of me talking about it, but the Cell had a presence when it debuted and it continued to do so for many years. The rules were simple during the first Hell in a Cell match and the rules have stayed the same. 2 men enter, only 1 man leaves. Well, both guys left quite a few times, but at its core, the match can only end via pinfall or submission. Fans were always promised a violent showdown whenever two wrestlers stepped inside this cell. Over time, it became the ultimate feud-ending match, which was fine, and the cell matches began to feel less special when WWE created the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view. Still though, cell matches were always decisive. You do what you have to do to get that pinfall or submission and anything goes. So fans were expecting a decisive winner at Hell in a Cell 2019 when Seth Rollins defended his Universal Championship against The Fiend. It's just a given, there's no other way the bout can end after all, and there were absolutely no changes to the rules made heading into the match. Explaining all this to you guys seems absolutely pointless. It's like saying a last man standing match ends when one guy can't stand up. We're talking about absolute fundamentals here and the very lowest of match expectations. You know all this, but it's important that you're reminded of all this. Hell in a Cell 2019 takes place in Sacramento, California. The Fiend versus Seth Rollins for the Universal Championship is our main event. A lot of people wondered how this one would turn out, so let's see how it all went down. Seth comes to the ring first, followed by The Fiend. The Fiend's entrance is great, by the way, and the remix of Broken Out in Love he used during this time period was also great. The Fiend sits in the corner, Seth looks on wondering how the hell he's gonna beat this guy, and those red lights you see are gonna stay on throughout the entire match. It reminded me of Kane's debut match against Mankind at Survivor Series 1997. The Fiend grabs Seth by the head and he tosses him across the ring. Seth comes back with a ton of punches, but a headbutt to the chest forces Seth to the outside. This next part here I liked. Seth can't figure out a way to get back in the ring without leaving himself open. You can sense a little bit of panic here as he grabs a kendo stick from under the ring and hopes the Fiend backs off. The Fiend decides to get on his knees and invite Seth in for a free shot. Seth tries his luck and no good. The Fiend doesn't even flinch. Wyatt takes the kendo stick away, Seth tries an aerial attack but he gets caught out and he ends up getting planted with a Uranagi. The crowd are behind Wyatt here, there's no two ways about it. He completely destroys Seth on the outside by using the cell, the ring posts and the ring steps, even taking a moment to playfully wave at fans sitting in the ringside seats. When Bret goes for a weapon underneath the ring though, Seth gets an opportunity to finally do some damage and the Fiend goes down after 3 shots with those ring steps. Seth quickly rushes to grab a table and he decides he's going to try to keep Bret stunned as he sets the table up. So he performs a few dives to the outside while still setting up furniture inside the ring. On the 3rd dive, Bret grabs Seth and he performs Sister Abigail into the side of the cell, and again the crowd cheer and they chant for the Fiend. The two get in the ring and it's the Fiend who ends up getting put through the table. Seth performs a splash and he thinks this is enough to stop the challenger, but not only does Bret kick out, he gets to his feet before Seth. Absolutely stunned at what's going on, Seth decides a curb stomp's in order and Bret gets his head planted in the canvas. It has no effect whatsoever. Bret stands up, Seth can't believe it, and the crowd goes nuts. Bret pulls off another Sister Abigail, but Seth kicks out, so the Fiend decides to snap Rollins' neck. The referee tries to check on Seth, but Wyatt tells him to get away. Seth rolls to the outside, and under the ring, Wyatt finds his massive, oversized mallet. Things are gonna get serious. The Fiend's gonna use his mallet to push Seth into a cell panel, but Seth fights back with a few super kicks. We then see another curb stomp from the Universal Champion, but Bret again gets up before Seth and Bret's already back in the ring. Rollins performs 2 springboard knee attacks and 2 super kicks. He then performs 3 back-to-back curb stomps and the fans are now booing loudly. When the Fiend gets to his feet, the crowd roars in approval, but then they show their disdain when Seth pulls off a pedigree followed by another curb stomp. The Fiend though isn't weakened at all. He kicks out at 1 when Seth covers him and the reactions from everyone is fantastic. Seth's absolutely shocked, the audience cheers, and the Fiend screams that he wants some more. Seth pulls off 5 more curb stomps, 5 curb stomps, and now the Fiend stays down. Rollins, to his credit, knows there's no point in covering his opponent, so he goes to the outside and he grabs a steel chair. Seth approaches the Fiend cautiously, he hits the Fiend on the head with that chair, he covers Bret, and Bret again kicks out at 1. Seth goes out and he grabs a ladder and he smashes it into the chair that's sitting on Bray's face. This time he gets a 2 count, but it doesn't matter, Bray's still in this thing. Rollins goes out again and this time he finds a toolbox. The toolbox flies open as Seth hits the ladder over and over again, and the crowd relentlessly boos Seth. Seth then goes out and he grabs a sledgehammer. The referee tells him not to do it. This isn't Seth and he should really stop and think about the damage he could cause. Seth does look like he's reconsidering for a moment, but then he swings that sledgehammer on the pile of steel and metal that sits on top of the Fiend, and the referee then calls for the bell. Yes, the referee called for the bell inside Hell in a Cell. Fans in the audience aren't angry at this finish, they're absolutely livid. Seth Rollins sits in the corner looking at what he just did as the crowd in attendance and viewers at home wonder how on earth a Hell in a Cell match can end via referee stoppage. A loud bullshit chant breaks out as everyone tries to digest what just happened, and the scene here in Sacramento is one of hostility. Officially, there's no winner. The booking team must have thought this was a clever way of getting out of that corner they found themselves in, but what they did here was make things 10 times worse. The Fiend had to get saved by the referee. Babyface Seth Rollins got blamed for the match stoppage and he got viciously booed out of the building. The Cell match itself became a joke because all it takes now is a sympathetic referee to end the match at his discretion. There is absolutely no upside to this kind of finish. The Fiend wakes up when the cell gets raised and Seth takes a mandible claw. The whole arena chants restart the match as the Fiend continues to destroy Seth on the outside with a few Sister Abigails, but when they realise the main event's over, they begin to boo again. Refund chants and AEW chants were heard as fans uploaded videos to YouTube that showed even more hostility, and backstage, things were also getting really heated up. The show goes off the air with Rollins bleeding from the mouth during a final mandible claw. The competitors head to the back, and according to Seth Rollins on Steve Austin's Broken Skull sessions, Rollins wanted to have a go at Vince McMahon. Rollins said that the finish of this match was protested and challenged a lot by both he and Bray Wyatt. The guys in the ring knew exactly how the crowd were going to react, and honestly, I think anyone with the slightest bit of wrestling knowledge would also see it's a really bad finish. But the guys told the writers and producers it was a bad idea, and there was no budge and no changes made. Rollins said sometimes you just gotta play your part and go along with what they want, but after the reaction inside the arena, Seth was seriously annoyed, and he said Tyson Kidd was backstage holding him back from going at Vince. Fans started a cancel WWE Network trend on Twitter. I always find that funny. But yeah, the social media fans were out in full force complaining about the Hell in a Cell disaster, while Sean Waltman flat out said, how the hell do you get DQ'd in a Hell in a freaking Cell match during the Hell in a Cell watch along? Now, let's not get over dramatic either. Right now, today, Bray Wyatt and Seth Rollins are absolutely fine. Seth is still putting on extremely good matches. And as for The Fiend, well, Bray Wyatt just came back to WWE after the whole White Rabbit thing that once again got the fans buzzing for weeks and weeks, so things aren't so bad right here and right now. The immediate aftermath though of Hell in a Cell wasn't handled very well either. The fan backlash led to Bray defeating Seth the following month for the title, and Seth's run as the Beast Slayer came to an end. He would end up turning heel, which, as far as I understand it, wasn't in Seth's immediate plans, though he did complain about not having enough heels to work against as a babyface. The Fiend got the Universal Championship. The company tried to cash in on custom-made belts that started off literally costing thousands of dollars, but those soon dropped in price when nobody but the most hardcore bought them. The originals are marked as handcrafted, but I'm not so sure, I'll need to verify that. And then the Fiend would drop the Universal Championship to Goldberg. Yeah, Goldberg. Another move that again benefited nobody, and a move that once again caused fans to get angry. In some cases, there were fans that completely tuned out of WWE television. The Fiend would continue on, but he was booked so badly from Hell in a Cell onwards, in my opinion. The one saving grace here though was the fact that fans understood that this was all out of Bray's control. Everyone knew the company were making bad decisions, and fans still loved Bray Wyatt because he brought something new and fresh to the table. So while the Fiend fell victim to bad decisions, Bray Wyatt was still very much liked by WWE fans. To be fair, the same goes for most WWE superstars during these rough years in the company. Personally speaking, I'm absolutely delighted he came back, and I really do hope he's allowed to let his creativity flourish once again, while the guys in creative make rational decisions in regards to his character in the ring. And as for Seth, Seth's absolutely fine. I don't think we need to worry at all about Mr. Rollins because, as mentioned before, I think he's yet to hit his best years in the company, and that says a lot when considering what he's already done inside the ring. Hell in a Cell matches for me had already went downhill, I'm not gonna lie. I used to really look forward to Cell matches, but now they kinda just feel like regular steel cage bouts. Good, but nothing special. I am excited about War Games coming to the main roster very soon though. That'll do it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching and take care. Everyone loves bad gimmicks in wrestling, and WCW had some of the most ridiculous gimmicks in the history of our great sport. Coming up with characters and making everyone feel unique has always been just as important as what happens in the ring. I mean, if everyone looked the same, talked the same, had the same entrance music, and wrestled the same, things would get pretty boring pretty fast. So a wrestler's persona becomes a key ingredient for success. Promoters and even the wrestlers themselves can sometimes get it wrong though. Maybe they're out of touch, maybe they're thinking about it too hard. It could be a punishment or a rib, or maybe they've convinced themselves that whatever dumb gimmick they're trying to push on the fans is absolutely awesome, and it's us fans who need to wake up and recognize greatness when it's right in front of our faces. Either way, some ridiculous characters have made it to our screens thanks to WCW, and today we're going to take a look at a bunch of these gimmicks and we'll try to pinpoint what went wrong, although I believe most of these will be painfully obvious. So let's get started. Here's some truly awful WCW gimmicks, and do keep in mind we're talking about the gimmicks here and not the men portraying the gimmicks. Some of these guys are great in the ring, but this video focuses on characters. Robert Keelan portrayed the Maestro in WCW, but what some of you may not know is that Robert was the grandnephew of Gorgeous George, a wrestling pioneer when it comes to character, charisma, flamboyance, and self-promotion. Robert even wrestled as Gorgeous George III before arriving to WCW, but seeing as the company already had a Gorgeous George, Randy Savage's valet and girlfriend at the time, Robert would portray a new character in WCW. Gorgeous George III had a match on WCW Pro in October of 1997, but in 1999 the Maestro was unleashed to unsuspecting and innocent viewers. Our guy would float around playing a piano, wasting WCW's money while the crowd looked on in sheer confusion. You can see the Gorgeous George similarities through the Maestro gimmick, but this character wasn't going to win many world championships on the big stage, right? It's one of those characters that's destined for WCW Thunder, and indeed the Maestro could be found on the WCWB show quite often. He would get himself a valet named Symphony, who many of you may know better as Ryan Shamrock from WWF, and he ended up in a feud that involved Ernest Miller and James Brown, as in the James Brown. I'd imagine not too many fans were rushing out to buy Maestro action figures, and I'd imagine WCW didn't even bother to put one out either. Still though, he made a lot of TV appearances, so fair dues I guess. Even to this day, I really don't think Brad Armstrong gets the recognition he deserves. He's one of the most underrated and underutilized talents in pro wrestling history. Brad was given quite a few questionable gimmicks, but none were as infamous as Arachnoman. Imagine a bootleg Spider-Man action figure that's been altered just enough to avoid a lawsuit, and you've got Arachnoman, a yellow and purple version of Marvel's web-slinging superhero that was supposed to appeal to very young viewers or very dumb old viewers. This blatant copying of a very well-known superhero didn't go unnoticed by Marvel's legal team, and the comic book giant threatened to sue WCW for copyright infringement unless Arachnoman ceased to exist on WCW television, and he took his ass back to Web City. Yes, he was billed from Web City. It's kinda funny really. The creative forces behind WCW really thought that changing Spider-Man's colours and changing his name would be enough to avoid legal trouble, and it's also funny that they thought a Spider-Man clone would make for a good wrestling character. This won't be the last Jim Herd creation in this video, I'm sure, but it's probably the most famous one.
Many people have real trouble separating Disco Inferno the wrestler from Glenn Gilberti, the man portraying the character. Personally speaking, I like the Disco Inferno character, and he's nowhere near as bad in the ring as what people make him out to be. He's no Bret Hart or Ricky Steamboat, but watching Nitro every week and watching the pay-per-views all over again for reliving the war has made myself and a lot of viewers break out of the echo chamber and realize that the popular narrative sometimes isn't true if you actually take the time to go back and take a closer look. I like the gimmick for how ridiculous it is, but it's also a gimmick that just doesn't sound right in a pro wrestling environment. As a matter of fact, it sounds absolutely terrible because it is terrible. Take Glenn out of the equation completely and think about it. A guy in the 90s obsessed with disco, a guy who wants to bring 70s disco dancing back to the masses while dressed like John Travolta from Saturday Night Fever. He struts, he dances, he has his own disco albums, he had a disco ball lower down during his entrances, he tried to get with the times by joining the Wolfpack and later the Filthy Animals, but he could never get truly accepted because he was a goofball. It's actually remarkable that the Disco Inferno gimmick lasted throughout the entire Monday Night War period of pro wrestling, and I think a lot of that has to do with how Glenn portrayed the gimmick. There was a time when people understood that the character wasn't supposed to be taken seriously, believe it or not, and there were numerous times when fans got behind the Inferno. A lot of people don't like to admit that today, and they just totally ignore the undeniable proof available on WWE Network. Glenn's views and opinions don't resonate well with others. No one will ever say Disco Inferno was world champion material. His gimmick was comedically terrible, but it's the kind of terrible I enjoyed in the 90s. This is more of an NWA gimmick, but I couldn't put this video together without including Lasertron. Hector Guerrero hasn't had much luck when it comes to characters, with the Gobbledy Gooker becoming one of the biggest jokes in WWF history. But before the Gooker hatched from his giant egg, Hector portrayed Lasertron, a gimmick based on laser tag. Yeah, the 1986 toy where you and a friend put targets on your bodies and you run around with laser guns trying to shoot each other. Lasertron would have one of those targets on his chest, he'd wear a mask that had little antennas, and yeah, sometimes he'd carry a laser gun. It completely falls into that same category as Arachnoman, really, you know? Kids love this shit, let's make a wrestler out of it. And again, like Arachnoman, it's a good wrestler getting stuck with something that's designed not to last too long. Now, to be fair, if you go back and look at comments from fans who enjoyed NWA wrestling on the Superstation, you'll see quite a few folks who enjoyed Lasertron, and Hector did introduce a lot of fans to Lucha Libre style wrestling, but the concept of the gimmick is still pretty ridiculous. Sorry, Lasertron marks. It's kind of like one of those AI art programs that combines two opposite things to create monstrosities. Let's try it out actually. Oh shit, that's actually awesome. If Arachnoman and Lasertron were targeted towards children, then I don't know what the target audience for Big Josh was. Matt Bourne was best known for his Doink character in WWF, but before that he was Big Josh in WCW, a lumberjack who wrestled in a flannel, a red ski cap, and a pair of rolled up jeans. Was this supposed to target dudes who enjoyed the outdoors or something? I don't know, but you can't imagine a lumberjack getting involved in many storylines that would incorporate the character in meaningful ways, you know? Matt Bourne was a talented guy, a respected worker throughout the industry by most accounts, and WCW had him coming to the ring with bears that pissed themselves. What's that all about? Characters in wrestling can be mysterious, exciting, thought-provoking, scary, funny, heroic, villainous. So what the fuck was Big Josh supposed to be? There's nothing remotely interesting nor exciting about this character. It's another one of those occupation gimmicks where the occupation selected's just lame, and it's not all that thrilling. It's kinda like a wrestling window cleaner or something, I don't know. Before Chavo Guerrero became Kerwin White, Barry Darsow became Stuart Payne, based on golfer Payne Stewart. It seemed like Darsow was given terrible gimmick after terrible gimmick once his days with Demolition ended, but a golfer is the least intimidating person who could step in between the ropes. It boggles the mind to think there's more than one person out there who thinks a golf gimmick in wrestling's actually a good idea, or at least a somewhat entertaining idea. When real golfer Payne Stewart died in a Learjet crash, WCW decided to rename this character to, get this, Mr. Hole-in-One Barry Darsow. So even if the original name was kinda clever, that part of the gimmick was taken away. This isn't a roll your eyes kind of gimmick where you get a little chuckle. This isn't a so bad it's good type of deal. This was just plain bad. Fans were forced to sit through Barry Darso's putting challenges and nobody cared. Absolutely nobody cared. Think about it, if a golfer got up in your face, chances are you're gonna punch him without hesitation. There's nothing scary about a pro golfer. The WCW Yeti. You guys who watch this channel know who the Yeti is, but for those who don't, here's exactly what happened. The Dungeon of Doom brought a frozen Yeti to WCW Nitro, and the big bastard escaped at the end of the show. At Halloween Havoc later in the week, the Yeti came down to the ring after Hulk Hogan lost the World Championship, and to add insult to injury, the Yeti humped the Hulkster in the middle of the ring. When we saw the Yeti again, he was dressed up like a giant ninja, and that's the story of the Yeti. Good night and God bless.
And the Yeti! And the Yeti!
They call me the Shockmaster.
Sting and the British Bulldog revealed their partner for an upcoming War Games match on a Flair for the Gold at Clash of the Champions 24. Sting said this guy will shock the world, and boy did he ever. Big Fred Ottman breaks through the wall like the Kool-Aid Man, and he fell in spectacular fashion. His glitter Stormtrooper helmet fell off, the other wrestlers on a Flair for the Gold laughed their asses off, and Ole Anderson, the guy doing the live voiceover for the Shockmaster, could be heard laughing as he tried to cut an intimidating promo. Everyone knows about this one, it's one of the greatest botches in wrestling history, but think about the character. A Stormtrooper helmet covered in glitter? Where's the correlation here with someone who's mastered the deadly arts of shocking? I probably would have got ripped apart if I didn't include the Shockmaster in this video, so there you have it. Legendary. We could have went through quite a few Ed Leslie WCW gimmicks here because each and every one is worth laughing at, but I'm going with the Booty Man, a wrestler who was obsessed with his rear end. I've heard this gimmick getting compared to Mr. Ass quite a lot in WWF, but there's a big difference here. Billy Gunn's Mr. Ass was an evolution of his badass Billy Gunn name, so it made sense. Ed Leslie, on the other hand, just showed up one week acting like a complete lunatic while shaking his hole about and pulling some insane faces. The Booty Man was another Hulk Hogan crony who would fight the good fight against the Dungeon of Doom and the Horsemen, but things got really unbelievable when Kimberly Page got the hots for Mr. Booty Man and she became his on-screen valet and girlfriend, calling herself the Booty Babe. And look, I can suspend my disbelief for a lot of things in wrestling, but Kimberly Page getting it on with Ed Leslie is a step too far, good sir. The Booty Man's finishing move was the high knee. Yeah, that's clever, isn't it? And as soon as this experiment failed, just like the Butcher and the Zodiac, Ed Leslie would become Hollywood Hogan's disciple. He was already his little disciple in real life, so that gimmick probably fit better than all the rest. I've heard people say they like this gimmick, but if you look hard enough, you'll find people who liked every gimmick in this video, so it's hardly surprising. Lance Storm revealed on Twitter that Mike hated this gimmick because of the attire he had to wrestle in during his matches, so if the talent portraying the gimmick isn't behind it, then it's just not gonna work. Still, Mike was told to do a job and he had to try and make the most of it. It's pretty damaging too because many consider Mike Awesome as one of the most underused wrestlers in history and a guy who deserves so much more than what he got. He left ECW because the checks were bouncing and he had mouths to feed. He went to WCW where he became that 70s guy and also the fat chick thriller. And quite simply, WCW fans didn't get to see the Mike Awesome that others knew from ECW and even Japan. Also, it was reported that Awesome was offered a WWF contract at the same time he was offered his WCW contract, and Paul Heyman tried to sway Mike into going to New York, but Mike wanted the bigger money being offered by WCW, so who knows what could have been. Make no mistake about it, the Renegade's character was completely based on a WWF superstar. Hulk Hogan needed some backup heading into Uncensored 95 where he was scheduled to take on Vader. Hogan promised fans a, quote, ultimate surprise, and a silhouette was shown of this ultimate surprise in the run-up to the pay-per-view. To be fair, Hogan did say his name was the Renegade, but there may have been younger fans who were maybe still unsure. At Uncensored, the Renegade made his proper WCW debut, and yeah, it's a bad take on Jim Hellwig. The general look, the mannerisms, the theme music, it's like your parents saying, "We have got the Ultimate Warrior at home." The Renegade was chewed up and spat out in terms of both his association with Hulk Hogan and his status in WCW. He would get a couple of pay-per-view matches and a few Nitro appearances, but he was soon relegated to the C shows, and eventually he would become nothing more than a job guy on Monday nights. Gimmicks that rip off other characters have actually worked in the past. Demolition ripping off the Road Warrior springs to mind. And of course, there's always the whole Nature Boy fiasco, but the Renegade in WCW felt like a cheap ploy. There's something a little unsettling now when you look back at John Laurinaitis and Shane Douglas portraying the dynamic dudes. It's like they're trying to be hip with all these kids, but why? Why? No grown-ass man should learn how to skateboard when approaching 30 while also wearing luminous baseball caps and bright shorts. I don't care who you are, that's fucking creepy. We should have known there was something dodgy about that Laurinaitis guy all the way back in the late 80s. So here you go, skateboarding fans and beach bums of the era too. This is your representation, Johnny Ace in the franchise, the living embodiment of the fellow kids meme. I made a whole WCW Blunder episode on Oz, so if you want to learn more, check that upload out. But in short, Kevin Nash portrayed not the Wizard of Oz, just Oz, the great and powerful Oz, but not the Wizard of Oz. Nash argued that Oz was a geographical region, but WCW couldn't care less. It was time to make a tie-in with the Wizard of Oz, so Big Kev put on his stupid mask and he went out there to complete silence. You've also got Kevin Sullivan as the Wizard, again not the Wizard of Oz, just a random wizard. You've got his pet monkey that died the night of Oz's debut, and you've got Big Sexy in his emerald tights looking incredibly uncomfortable, a surefire recipe for success. In saying all this though, the Oz character was way more popular in Japan. Fans over there couldn't get enough of this giant clusterfuck, but fans in the States and practically everywhere else weren't into it. Thankfully, Vinny Vegas, Nash's next gimmick, was much better, and I don't care what anyone says, Vinny Vegas was good, and that character won't be featured in our video today. Big John Tenta portrayed Earthquake in WWF, and when he jumped to WCW, he became Avalanche. The WWF felt that was borderline gimmick infringement, brother, so Avalanche became the Shark. Nothing was subtle about the Shark. He had shark teeth painted on his face, his theme music was inspired by that classic Jaws track, and he used his hand like a fin when walking down to the ring, and he wanted to take a bite out of his opponents. Well, he didn't really, but let's just pretend he did. Tenta and WCW eventually learned that the Shark wasn't going anywhere, so John came out and cut a promo where he said he's not a real shark. Surprise, surprise. He's just a man named John Tenta. Tenta would then wrestle under his real name, but things didn't get much better when Big Bubba Rogers started shaving his head and his facial hair. Had Tenta remained an underwater shark, then maybe that wouldn't have happened. It's always the one that gets brought up when people talk about Jim Herd, and for good reason too. The Ding Dongs. Ding and Dong, or Ding Dong 1 and Ding Dong 2. They had bells around their ankles, bells around their wrists, they had their own personal bell in the corner because they liked to ring bells, I don't know. Jim Herd thought this was money, but the fans in attendance and even Jim Ross on commentary thought otherwise during their debut. Again, this was supposed to appeal to kids, and it falls so flat on its face that it makes you wonder what kind of kids Jim Herd and company actually knew. I mean, were there focus groups for this kind of shit? Because I can't imagine any kid being excited for the Ding Dongs. You'd probably get laughed at in the playground if you said the Ding Dongs are my favourite tag team. Again, I talked about this one in WCW Blunder, but in short, the Demon became a thing because apparently Gene Simmons wanted it to be a thing. Kiss and WCW would work together to put on a Kiss concert on WCW programming, and a deal was struck where a Kiss-inspired wrestler would work on shows, and get this, a main event on pay-per-view was also promised. This was avoided by putting the Demon match on the middle of the card, and the commentators just said it was a main event. Dale Torberg, the guy who played the Demon, comes across as a real nice guy, and on top of that, he was a big fan of Kiss. He wanted the gimmick to work, but this is one of those ideas that you just know from the planning stage that it's gonna suck. If you loved Kiss, you might have got something out of this. For everyone else though, it was another bad WCW idea, and one of the dumbest partnership deals the company ever struck up. There's more to this one though, so check out that Blunder video. He blocks Rhodes? What's the deal with this one? There's an urban legend floating around that Hulk Hogan dismissed Roadblock in a gym when Mr. Block asked Hogan, how do you get into the wrestling business? Later that night, according to legend, Roadblock jumped the guardrail, he chased down Hogan's opponent that night, the one-man gang, and he pinned Gang to the mat before getting arrested. Sounds like absolute bullshit, but it's a story that's out there. Apparently, after this brave showing, the Hulkster got Roadblock a job. Yeah, this is bullshit. The gimmick's a strange one, but I guess no one likes a roadblock. There's nothing worse than sitting in traffic while a giant mammoth of a man blocks the way. Roadblock would get a few matches on WCW Nitro, but his main home was on WCW Saturday Night for a while, where he continued to carry his sawhorse to the ring while not exactly exciting fans, let's be honest. The guy could move for someone his size, but, well, he's a roadblock. A walking, talking, wrestling roadblock. That's going to do it for this one. I made a list of around 50 gimmicks and we only got through around 16 or 17 today, so let me know what others you want to see in part 2. Maybe you enjoyed some of these gimmicks and characters in today's video, and it's great if you did. Wrestling characters can resonate with different people in different ways, so if you were a big ding-dongs guy, or if you thought the Yeti was nothing but wasted potential, then let me know. As mentioned, I like the Disco Inferno of all gimmicks, so there's no shame in liking some of the more ridiculous things in pro wrestling. It's supposed to be fun. But thanks for watching, guys, and thanks for putting up with my bad throat. I'm sure you noticed it again, and it's really sore to talk, but I hope you enjoyed this look at some of the most awful gimmicks in WCW history, and please take care.
A few weeks before the Invasion pay-per-view in 2001, the WWF decided to end an episode of Raw with a WCW match. Booker T and Buff Bagwell had the honour of representing an opposing brand in front of a pretty loyal WWF audience, and as you could probably guess, the match wasn't well received. It's been said that the crowd reaction to this one led Vince McMahon to completely change future plans for a proper WCW revival, and scheduling for future WCW Monday Nitro shows ended up getting completely scrapped, which admittedly does sound like a knee-jerk reaction. But what we'll do today is look at how the match came to be, we'll look at the match itself in detail to see what went wrong, and we'll look at the effect it had on the overall future of pro wrestling. This is Booker T vs Buff Bagwell, the WCW main event on WWF Raw. On the night where Vince McMahon announced he had purchased WCW, the atmosphere over in Panama City Beach, Florida was said to be a little weird. There were guys that were happy that WCW was finally coming to an end, while others, naturally, were worried about job security. Shane Helms talked about looking at everyone backstage and trying to work out where they would fit if they were called up to WWF, saying that many people burned bridges long ago, but there was still a mixture of hope and sadness around the whole thing. On Raw that fateful night, on the 26th of March 2001, Vince McMahon stood in the ring where he bragged about taking control of WCW, and he wanted to gauge interest in regards to the wrestlers that fans still wanted to see who currently worked for WCW. Hulk Hogan and Lex Luger didn't get great crowd reactions, but fans did cheer for Goldberg, Sting, Scott Steiner, Booker T and Buff Bagwell. Buff Daddy saw this as a good sign. He said in an interview that he kinda knew he was going to get picked up after hearing the Raw crowd react favourably to his name getting mentioned, and while it does sound like Buff may have been jumping to conclusions a little bit here, he was still more hopeful about his chances than what he was beforehand. Booker T ended up winning the World Belt during the final Nitro, a show that was produced by WWF, so that gave Booker reassurance that he had a job too if he wasn't going to sit out the remaining dates of his contract. In the end, both Buff and Booker accepted buyouts of their AOL Time Warner contracts, and both men got brought in to begin a new journey with Vince McMahon and the WWF. Booker T made an impact by attacking Stone Cold Steve Austin at the 2001 King of the Ring. Bagwell's debut, however, wasn't nearly as impactful. He just kinda showed up when the Invasion storyline was already underway. Judging by practically every account you read online, the WCW guys who came over to WWF for the invasion angle weren't liked very much by the WWF roster. The locker room was segregated. On one side you had WWF guys, and on the other side you had WCW guys. This was confirmed by Shane Helms during an interview. Speaking of Shane Helms, he and Buff Bagwell got into an altercation very early on, and many believe this altercation was what pretty much sealed Buff Bagwell's fate in WWF. And keep in mind too, this all happened before Buff even had a WWF match. The WCW guys were complaining about WWF rings, so they were all given workout time to get used to the bigger size and different ring ropes used by WWF in comparison to WCW. Shane was dealing with a bad shoulder at the time, and everyone knew he had a bad shoulder. He and Buff start trash talking each other at one of these training sessions, and it ends with Buff slapping Shane and Shane retaliating by throwing a water bottle at Buff Daddy. Please remember too that this recollection of events is from Shane Helms himself on the Sam Roberts podcast. Folks said it was a frozen water bottle, including Buff. Shane said it wasn't frozen. The water bottle ended up busting Bagwell wide open, so blood's flowing everywhere, and Shane's like, oh no, what do I do now? But it turned out that the water bottle incident was one of the best things that could have happened to Shane. The following week on TV, the APA took Shane's bag and they brought it over to the WWF side. Steve Austin approached Shane and he patted him on the back, and Shane earned the respect of the WWF locker room for standing up for himself in dealing with what many believe to be this loudmouth who just walked in thinking he owns the place. According to Bagwell, Johnny Ace, Fit Finlay and others approached Buff to ask what happened, and Buff said he slipped and fell, trying to cover up for Shane, saying as Shane's spot in WWF wasn't as ironclad as Bagwell's. Bagwell also said Shane was almost crying when cleaning Buff up afterwards in the bathroom. So yeah, believe what you want to believe, but the altercation did happen. It happened in front of a bunch of WWF guys, and Shane came out looking better than Buff afterwards. So, even before this Booker and Bagwell match took place, Buff was already on bad terms with the WWF locker room, and according to everything we hear about the locker room back then, this would have been a very difficult spot for Bagwell to climb out of. There was also a story about Bagwell showing up to WWF studios in really bad shape. Not sure if this was for a photo shoot or pre-tapes, but according to Bruce Pritchard, he was in a really bad way. I really wanted to be fair here and give recollections that are both for and against Buff Bagwell's actions, but pretty much every account of this time period's the same. Everyone says the same thing about Bagwell's short run in WWF, and the only person who defends Buff is Buff Bagwell himself. WWF Raw's War took place in Tacoma, Washington on July 2nd, 2001, and the show was going to be main evented by a WCW match. The match, Buff Bagwell vs Booker T, took place the night before at a house show. Unfortunately, the historic significance of such a match gets overshadowed by a negative crowd reaction, but I think it's incredible that this thing even took place. A WCW match happening on Raw was a fantasy booker's dream. Folks who watched the entire Monday Night War from start to end were very intrigued about what was going to happen, and just the mere thought of a WCW match taking place in a WWF ring was enough to get fans tuning into Raw to see how it would all play out. This was an experiment. We'll talk a bit more about what was supposed to come of all this, but first let's see what happened in the final 15 minutes of this particular episode of Raw, and then we can circle back. Now, if you've no idea why this match is so infamous, you only need to do a quick Google search and about 95% of the search results will mention how bad the match was, how awkward it was, how downright putrid the whole contest was from start to end, and how it led to the real final nail in WCW's coffin. Keep that knowledge in mind, because those who haven't seen this match are going to go into it after reading those internet articles and they'll expect the absolute worst match in Raw history. The match was announced by Shane McMahon at the beginning of Raw. Shane said Linda McMahon was watching with her attorneys and she'd be very upset if Stone Cold Steve Austin got involved in this main event. Keep this in mind too, because we'll circle back to this also. Paul Heyman and Jim Ross leave the commentary table for the main event. WCW graphics are placed at the entranceway and a WCW logo shines in the ring. There's even a new WCW ring apron. Shane McMahon makes his way down to the ring to welcome the commentators and special guest ring announcer for this historic match. On commentary, we've got Scott Hudson and Arn Anderson, and announcing the superstars to the ring, it's Stacy Keibler. The crowd reaction so far has been lukewarm at best, but the crowd reaction do boo loudly when Stacy announces Nick Patrick is the referee for tonight's main event. William Regal then comes out to tell Shane he has to leave the arena while this match takes place, and Shane says it's all about the wrestlers anyway, so he's happy enough to head out. Booker T, the champion, comes out first for some reason. His reaction was okay, and Bagwell then comes out to a decent reaction too. Nothing brilliant, but nothing necessarily bad either. The competitors are now in the ring. Buff Bagwell poses while Booker T looks pretty determined, and just as the bell rings, Bagwell launches an attack on Booker. Within the first 15 seconds of the match beginning, the crowd are chanting boring. The men haven't been given a chance to do anything at all except a few strikes, a rake in the face from Buff and a double arm DDT. And already the folks in the audience have made up their minds that they don't want to see this match. Buff lays in a few corner strikes. He sends Booker to the opposite corner, but the WCW champ gets a boot up and Buff ends up taking a spinning front kick. Booker falls on his ass after the move, but if you watch closely, his foot actually got caught in Bagwell's left arm. Buff then takes a back elbow, but he comes back by dropping Booker on the top turnbuckle. The distance was off here, and this could go back to WCW guys being used to smaller rings, but it's nothing absolutely terrible. Bagwell then delivers a swinging neckbreaker. He looks out at the crowd before doing his little Buff Bagwell dance. He then delivers a suplex, and not only are the crowd now chanting boring, but their attention's been drawn to something else going on inside the arena. Everyone's looking away from the ring. What do you do when the crowd's not enjoying the match? You go for the chin. That's right, but even some chin work won't save this one. Buff then drives his knee into Booker's back. Everyone's still looking at something else going on in the crowd, and as Booker starts fighting back, the audience start chanting, "This match sucks." There's absolutely no saving this one, even though personally I don't think neither Booker or Buff have done anything wrong. Nothing that warrants this kind of reaction anyway. Booker lands a dropkick, but Buff gets back to his feet before the champ. Booker gets kicked in the ribs before Bagwell tells the audience to shut up, and Booker gets choked on the middle rope just before we go to the match finish. Booker lands his jumping sidekick, a few clotheslines, and his trademark running forearm. The crowd are still unsettled, but not as bad as what they once were. Booker then hits the axe kick that does get a good reaction, but just after Booker performs the spinneroonie, the crowd pops for Steve Austin and Kurt Angle hitting the ring. Austin and Angle attack Booker, and Buff Bagwell helps the WWF guys. Scott Hudson and Arn Anderson aren't sure why Buff's doing this, but that's how the match ends, and that's what all the fuss was about really. Bell to bell, the match was about 5 minutes long. Booker takes a beating on the outside, he gets thrown into the ring steps, and Austin, Angle and Bagwell continue to attack Booker all the way up the rampway. We then cut over to seedy bastard Vince McMahon trying to get his rocks off with Tori Wilson, only to get caught by his wife Linda. Again, we'll circle back to this in a moment. And then we cut back to Booker, Austin, Bagwell and Angle again. Booker continues to get annihilated, and it ends with Booker literally getting thrown out of the building, just tossed out onto the street like a piece of garbage. Bagwell celebrates with his new best friends, but Buff really should have known better. Angle and Austin attack Buff Daddy, and he too gets thrown out of the arena before Raw fades to black. Let's go back to the very beginning of the match. Buff Bagwell stated in an interview that the minute his music hit, he was told not to look directly into the cameras. Here's what Buff said about this during an episode of the Steve Austin Show on Podcast 1.
And I swear to God, back to me thinking something else was up with it. I just believe it with my heart. My music comes on, and I swear to God, I took the step to walk out, and Shane McMahon steps in front of me and goes, "Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, don't look in the cameras." And I said, "Have you ever watched one of my matches? That's all I do." I said, "The only thing I do is pose and look in the cameras."
That's the gimmick.
That's my whole gimmick. So if you watch it back, yeah, I'll walk down that aisle and act like the TV cameras got the plague. I'm trying to get away from it. I'm dodging the camera. I'm looking away from it. I can't look in the camera. I'm like, oh my God, I can't look in the camera. So, oh my God. So I was totally I'm getting booed and shit thrown at me. I'm like, what the is going on? I'm getting booed for the first time.
Now, we all know Buff likes to look into cameras, and he's absolutely right. It's what separated him from others during his matches, and it's something he tended to do in every single one of his matches ever since he joined the NWO and WCW. Would looking into the cameras make the match any better? No, it wouldn't have. The crowd still would have booed it. But Bagwell was thrown off a little when he had to stop doing something that he was so used to doing for the past 5 or 6 years, or whatever it was. Bagwell believes the whole thing was nothing but sabotage. The WWF higher-ups knew the crowd was going to react the way they did, and the match was destined to fail from the moment it got booked. And you know what? I really can't see how this match could have played out in any other way. WCW were already made to look like the bad guys. They were the invaders trying to make a name for themselves. You're in front of a crowd who paid to see WWF wrestling, and this audience just wasn't going to pop for Bagwell nor Booker. On top of that, WWF already planned to have the match thrown out when they sent Austin and Angle to the ring. Even if the audience cheered for Booker and Bagwell, it was still going to end with both men getting thrown out of the arena before Raw ended. So that tells us what the WWF thought of the match even before the bell rang to kick it off. Bagwell also stated that the match should have taken place the following week on Raw in Atlanta. WWF was going to take place in WCW's backyard, and it would have made way more sense to hold the match off for a week. And yeah, I do agree it would have made more sense, but then again, if WCW were to survive, they simply can't run matches in Atlanta every single week under the WWF regime. The brand would have to succeed in places other than their home turf. So yes, it might have been fine to begin with, but long term, no. It didn't really benefit WCW nor WWF. Maybe getting things off to a good start in Atlanta could have helped for sure, but here's something else to consider. DDP wrestled The Undertaker in Atlanta on the following episode of Raw, and the crowd booed DDP in favour of the dead man. These were WWF audiences the guys were wrestling in front of. WCW was considered a laughingstock by many WWF viewers just before the doors closed. So while a WCW match happening in a WWF ring is a historic moment in wrestling history, it was always gonna be like this. In the same Buff Bagwell interview, Stone Cold echoed my feelings towards the match pretty much word for word. Austin said the Buff vs Booker match wasn't great, but it wasn't bad either. It wasn't the worst thing in the world, and even Stone Cold says that reports about the match and what everyone says about the match is blown out of proportion. I wholeheartedly agree with that, and trust me too, I watch a lot of matches on a weekly basis while noting down everything that happens from bell to bell. It wasn't a good match, but I've seen way worse during WWF and WCW's peak years. It's been reported and confirmed by those working in the company at the time that the initial idea was to run WCW shows after the purchase was made. WCW Nitro would potentially air on Monday night, seeing as Vince felt WCW needed Monday nights more than Raw, and Raw would maybe get moved into SmackDown slot. That part's never really been confirmed. Vince McMahon apparently watched this Buff vs Booker match and he decided to completely cancel the WCW television revival. Nitro wouldn't make a comeback on TV, there would be no WCW pay-per-views moving forward, the deal was over, and WCW could instead exist alongside ECW as the Alliance stable. Remember when Linda caught Vince with his pants down? According to Dave Meltzer, and yes I know Dave Meltzer, but let's entertain this for a moment. According to Dave Meltzer, this was going to play into the Linda and Vince divorce angle where Linda's lawyers would get her the Monday Night TV slot as part of the settlement. This was going to be how Nitro would begin airing again every week. If you remember back, it was actually Linda who said the WCW superstars should get time on Raw. Meltzer said he spoke to a man named Ed Cohen, head of scheduling at WWF during this time period, and apparently 6 to 9 months of WCW dates, including cities and booked venues, were all completely scrapped, and Ed had to go back and cancel a lot of shows because Vince McMahon felt the audiences weren't going to accept World Championship Wrestling moving forward. It seems insane that the history of WCW, the stories, the rivalries, everything about that company that had millions of fans, the fate of WCW's legacy and its future was all on the line in that one Booker T versus Buff Bagwell match, and it almost sounds difficult to believe, but if you know anything about the way Vince McMahon operates, then you know that changing things at the very last minute seems to be one of his superpowers. Many times you'll read about episodes of Raw and outcomes of matches getting changed days, hours, even minutes before they take place, so it really shouldn't be surprising at all. But I do think WWF underestimated how much some fans really love WCW. The fact that it was all judged by one crowd reaction on WWF Raw still seems absolutely crazy though. I mentioned this in my old Invasion videos, but I really do believe that a little more patience was needed with this whole thing. But that's what happened apparently, and WCW is a true separate brand and company, not a faction, but a true separate entity altogether, was pretty much dead when Raw ended that night. There was another WCW exclusive match on WWF television though that no one really brings up. On the July 5th, 2001 episode of SmackDown, Booker T wrestled DDP in a match that had the complete WCW branding just like Buff vs Booker, but the decision was already made to scrap WCW as its very own program before this match took place. DDP vs Booker was taped the day after Raw, and yes, the fans reacted much more favourably to this match in comparison to the Bagwell match. Buff Bagwell ended up getting released from his WWF contract. He believes he was set up, and he blames Jim Ross for spreading a story about his mother Judy calling in to request time off for her son due to injuries, and to also complain about Buff's travel arrangements. One week he's in the main event, the next week he's fired. Bagwell said Ross told him to take a week off house shows because there were some big plans lined up for him at the Atlanta Raw. He showed up to Atlanta and he got fired. The story that stuck though was Bagwell not attending the house shows because his mother phoned up to complain. Buff blames Jim Ross for starting this rumour, and to this day he's stuck by it. It's completely up to you though what you want to believe. Jim Ross said Buff had a higher opinion of himself than what Vince McMahon did. Ross is just the bad guy in all this because he's the one that has to deliver bad news. And it all comes down to Buff's lifestyle at the time being way too much for the WWF to handle, and Bagwell just not being a good fit for WWF television. McMahon didn't see any money in Buff Bagwell apparently, but again, that's for you to decide as a fan. Bagwell does seem to be pretty polarizing, but personally speaking, I think he had a lot to offer. He just needed to be in the right frame of mind, and WWF would need to take a bit more care about how they present him. Booker T had some obstacles to overcome, but he became a mainstay on WWF and WWE television. When all was said and done, Booker had a great run and he became a two-time Hall of Famer. And as for WCW, well, the WWE would eventually realize that a lot of people still had nostalgia for the company, and they would end up bringing out quite a lot of WCW DVDs, documentaries, and other merchandise. But the WCW name pretty much died after the Invasion angle wrapped up. Eric Bischoff's WWF debut brought a lot of old memories back when he talked about destroying Monday Night Raw in the ratings, but over time WCW became nothing but a memory. I'm not sure what Buff and Booker could have done differently in the Tacoma main event, but I think it's pretty obvious that the match shouldn't have been booked in the first place. Do let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for watching guys, and take care. Today I'm going to talk about bad gimmick matches in pro wrestling, either specifically bad matches or match gimmicks that were just bad in concept. Pro wrestling gimmick matches can be awesome. Standard one-on-one and tag matches are fine of course, but adding stipulations and certain win conditions not only makes things more exciting, but it also helps to break up the monotony of wrestling shows by giving fans something different. Gimmick matches can also be used to end feuds, they can help with a superstar's character, they can draw in more viewers with gimmick matches being big spectacles or must-see showdowns. Really, gimmick matches just make a lot of sense and they should be considered a necessity of pro wrestling, a vital part of creating wrestling shows. The thing is though, and you know where this is going I'm sure, but sometimes gimmick matches turn out pretty bad, and they can turn pretty bad for a lot of different reasons. Maybe the idea was awful right out the gate, maybe the wrong guys got involved,
Perhaps the match was shot pretty badly and the overall production was to blame. Maybe it was something people just didn't want to see. Whatever the case may be, there are plenty of bad gimmick matches throughout pro wrestling history, and honestly, there's more than what I originally thought. I began thinking about ideas for this video and I ended up with quite a lot of bad gimmicks and bad matches, so this one's going to get split up into a few parts just like my heels and babyfaces videos. As always, these are just my thoughts by the way. There's maybe some matches I didn't like that you thought were awesome, and that's fine. Hearing different opinions is good, so let me know your thoughts in the comments, and also let me know some gimmick matches you didn't enjoy, and I'll see if I've already noted them down in the next video. This one has only happened once, and hopefully it never happens again. Reportedly, WWE was paid a ridiculous amount of money to cross-promote Army of the Dead, a 2021 zombie movie that starred Dave Batista that I didn't think was too bad actually. The WWE wouldn't just show a 2-minute trailer for the movie or slap the poster beside the awfully named WrestleMania Backlash logo. No, they made sure their sponsor got their money's worth by booking a zombie lumberjack match. Damian Priest and The Miz had to deal with the undead around the ring as they tried to have a wrestling match, and it ended with John Morrison getting devoured and The Miz also suffering the same fate before the show moved on. That's right, the show moved on after zombies ate Morrison and Miz. You could say, hey, it's all good fun, stop being such a buzzkill and enjoy it for what it is. But in a world where you're conditioned to suspend disbelief, this one seemingly goes in the opposite direction. WWE got destroyed by critics and fans alike for booking the match, while The Miz said he was happy to get involved because it was an idea that was very much outside the box. Being outside the box doesn't make something good though. The general concept of this one sounded bad from the very beginning. I covered this match in a previous video, but the King of the Road match is pretty simple. Two guys fighting it out on an 18-wheeler. The first guy who can ring a bell wins. It was pretty bad though because the competitors would fall all over the place while trying to maintain balance and have some sort of fight or wrestling match. This one took place at WCW Uncensored 1995, and to give WCW credit, they didn't do a terrible job of taping the match. In terms of camera work and overall production, it isn't all that bad. The action though is seriously lacking, and it becomes very stale within the first 30 or 40 seconds. Booker Dusty Rhodes and the two competitors, Dustin Rhodes and Blacktop Bully, were fired after the match aired due to WCW's no blood policy, so it was a disaster every way you look at it. TNA would host reverse battle royals where the match starts outside the ring. Half the superstars who get in the ring will then be allowed to compete in a traditional battle royal. Generally, this means you've got a bunch of guys punching and kicking each other during the first half of the match with no real wrestling going on, and you've also got guys who seemingly forget how to get into a wrestling ring as they try to add drama to something so incredibly basic. It's a terribly dumb concept in general, and it's not the last bad TNA gimmick we're gonna look at, unfortunately. The Punjabi prison match was supposed to be very different. Court Bauer, who was working for WWE at the time, had shown Vince an unneeded death match with an exploding ring. Vince actually signed off on the idea, according to Court, and the Punjabi prison match was going to be this extremely dangerous spectacle similar to death matches held in Japan. Court then said the idea went to Kevin Dunn, and around 10 days before the 2006 Great American Bash, the idea had been altered so much that it represented nothing from the original pitch. There were no explosions, there was a lot of bamboo, and Court said this new idea looked more like a playset based on Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Basically, the original idea had mutated into this monstrosity that just didn't work. That wasn't bamboo that was used, it was like the old blue steel cage only with a lick of paint. And what's more, the rules of a Punjabi prison match, while not hard to understand, were unnecessarily excessive. Here's the WWE explaining the rules of the match on their website. To win, a superstar must escape both cages, a prospect that is far easier said than done. The interior structure contains 4 doors, all of which are attended by a referee. When a superstar calls for the door to be opened, they have 1 minute to walk through it and into the outer structure. If they don't make it through in time, the door is shut and locked for good. If a superstar fails to make it through all 4 doors in the allotted time, they must climb out of the inner structure. It makes for good practice, as the only way to escape the outer ring is to climb up and over it. The first superstar whose feet touch the ground wins the match. I think the Punjabi prison sure looks intimidating, but it's just not all that fun to watch matches take place inside the structure. Thankfully though, this one seems retired for good. These matches were featured in my old WCW Blunder series, and for good reason too. Scotty Steiner got his own match type in WCW that basically featured a birdcage in the middle of the ring. This space-limiting structure would feature Scott Steiner and his helpless opponent or opponents trying to survive a beatdown from the big bad booty daddy. Steiner said before the first match that the only way to win was via submission. There was no way in and no way out. But that first match also ended when Tank Abbott interfered by raising the Asylum structure. Oh, and the match was also thrown out. It was a disqualification. So during this first ever Asylum encounter, where the rules of the match should be firmly established in both theory and in practice, WCW decided to completely screw everything up. The main issue with this one though was the limited space inside the Asylum. There wasn't a terrible lot the guys could do in there, and it was even worse when more than 2 guys competed in the match. It's almost too easy to include this one, but it simply has to get brought up too. Many would say it's the absolute worst gimmick match the WWE or WWF ever put on, but I'm not so sure nowadays. I mean, that zombie lumberjack match could have overtook it as the worst match ever, but anyway. So the Kennel from Hell is a steel cage surrounded by the Hell in a Cell. Sounds awesome so far. In between the cage and the cell, there's a bunch of rabid dogs waiting to take a bite out of the competitors should they be unlucky enough to fall between the structures. Problem was though, WWE didn't use trained dogs. They pooped around the ring, they urinated around the ring, they weren't concerned about the competitors at all, and instead their owners just kinda walked around while trying to get their pooches to do something remotely intimidating. If there was a match that just used the cage and the Hell in a Cell, that could have been something. Instead, WWF killed the idea by including some distressed doggos, and the Kennel from Hell match became legendary for just how awful it was. When the WWE started producing TLC pay-per-views, they wanted to expand on the idea by also including table matches, ladder matches, and chair matches. Table matches were already established and the win condition was a good one. Put your opponent through a table. Ladder matches were also well established and the idea behind a ladder match was a brilliant one. Climb the ladder and retrieve the belt. So what are you supposed to do in a chairs match? Give your opponent a comfortable seat? No, basically, using chairs as a weapon is legal, and that's it. No other weapons are legal, just chairs. It's dumb when you think about it, and the match type was only put together to fit into the TLC pay-per-view concept. It's totally unnecessary, and it feels like a step down from a more traditional street fight or Extreme Rules match. Chair matches may be fine once the bell rings, it's the idea of the match that feels unnecessary to me. Yep, WWE produced a TLC pay-per-view named Tables, Ladders, Chairs, and Stairs, and you guessed it, they included a stairs match. Same concept as before, only this time you can only use the ring steps. The Big Show and Eric Rowan competed in this match, and WWE actually produced a tail of the tape for the stairs with some ridiculous exaggerations, as in the ring steps weighing a total of 275 pounds. The match was slow, it plodded along with the stairs now becoming the most dangerous weapon in WWE history. No idea why they bothered with this one, and it's not a match I care to watch again. It sounds alright in theory, but the execution was really bad for this one. The Kiss Demon vs Vampiro took place at Bash at the Beach 2000. To win the graveyard match, you had to incapacitate your opponent long enough so you could return to the arena. Now, I've heard people laugh at this because there's no way a graveyard could be right next to the arena, right? Well, Bash at the Beach 2000 was held in the Ocean Center in Daytona Beach, and a quick look on Google Maps shows that Pinewood Cemetery is practically right beside the venue, so that part did make sense. What doesn't make sense though is WCW failing to properly light whatever set they used for this abomination properly. It's difficult to make out what's going on, seeing as the demon quickly loses that torch he was holding, and the only light source we have for a while is the flashlight held by referee Charles Robinson. The match too is just awful. We get a game of hide and seek at the beginning. We learn that somehow the demon's head is more solid than a tombstone. We get to see the guys frolicking in the water. Well, we kinda get to see the guys frolicking in the water. It's one of those matches that could have been something, but absolutely nothing redeemable comes of it. The Doomsday cage match, my. I thought the Doomsday cage looked great. I liked the idea of this giant imposing 3-storied cage sitting at the entranceway. The match itself though was really sketchy to say the least, and we really should have known this before it got underway. WCW didn't really explain how the match was going to work until just before the competitors entered the steel structure at Uncensored 96. We were told that Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage would have to survive different levels and segments of the cage in order to win the match, with their final challenge waiting for them in a ring right at the ground level. But nothing else was really explained. Are the babyfaces supposed to pin or submit their opponents at each level? Where do the heels go after getting defeated? Can guys from previous levels join in during subsequent levels? The fine details were purposefully left out, and you can just tell that absolutely no one had a clue what was going on. It turned into an absolute mess as Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage destroyed 8 heels in one match. Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Lex Luger, the Taskmaster, the Barbarian, Ming, and Zeus in the Ultimate Solution all fell at the hands of the Mega Powers. Add in the Booty Man for some more absolute nonsense and you've got yourself a match for the ages, ladies and gents. Check out my Uncensored 96 video if you want to see how it all went down. Let's take away the guy's vision and put them in a wrestling ring. Why this was done so many times is beyond me, but the match never works. This one doesn't need an explanation, but no one will ever call any blindfold match an all-time classic, or even good for that matter. No one will ever convince me either that there's fun to be had in these matches because they were all pretty bad. The standout probably being Jake Roberts versus Rick Martel at WrestleMania 7. Here you've got 2 great superstars competing in the biggest show of the year. Why the fuck would you limit their abilities by putting them in a dumb gimmick match is beyond me. There may be people out there who enjoy these, and again, you may think I'm being too harsh and it's just a bit of fun, but I just don't find them fun to watch at all, no matter how many comedy spots are used. I've mentioned before that I absolutely loved the idea of World War III matches, and hearing about 60 guys competing in 3 rings sounded insane to me. WCW pay-per-views were hard to come by around these neck of the woods during this era, but I became obsessed about seeing the first World War III match after reading about it in an old Power Slam magazine. Quick side note, Power Slam magazine in the UK was awesome back in the day. Anyway, I got into tape trading a little, also through Power Slam magazine and their little pen friends section, and an absolute hero sent me a copy of World War III 1995. To say I was disappointed would be an understatement. I think I told this story before, but not only was it bad enough trying to watch the action on these 3 tiny screens, but the good man who sent me the tape probably copied it from a copy that was a copy from another copy. The questionable tape quality mixed with WCW's production of World War III matches left a lot to be desired, and all my expectations got flushed right down the toilet. The idea is a sound one, but I'm surprised someone didn't stop and think, hey, maybe this will be hard to broadcast, maybe we should rethink this, you know? They did get it right by putting the last bunch of wrestlers into a single ring, but by that time you're just watching a standard battle royal. So all in all, I've more of a personal dislike for this one due to this wild image I got in my head about how this would play out. WCW did deliver on what they said, but they didn't think about the production of such a match for viewers at home. The Junkyard Invitational took place at WCW Bash at the Beach 99, and there was a strange mix of wrestlers in the match. Luchadors like La Parka and Ciclope, hardcore brawlers like Public Enemy and Sandman. Sandman was given the abysmal name of Hack in WCW, by the way. You had technicians such as Lord Steven Regal. There was a real mishmash of wrestlers here that already grew concerns for viewers in regards to WCW's upcoming hardcore division. You also had a lot of stunt effects in this match that didn't go according to plan. Delayed explosions, fires, that kind of thing. And the whole match was hard to see, with a helicopter spotlight being used as the main light source. Even worse, apparently quite a few guys got legitimately injured in the match due to WCW filming this thing in an actual junkyard. Yes, they did use not so special effects, but most of the weapons and props were real. A lot of effort for very little payoff. It was hard to watch from a production standpoint. It just felt like WCW were playing catch up with their hardcore division and starting off in one of the worst ways possible. Oh boy. Let me say first of all that I felt really bad for the guys involved in this match, and the work that was put into the match before the explosion was good. There was a lot of physicality mixed in with some good storytelling in regards to the men involved, but my god, the end of that match. There's never been a big American promotion who put on a match like this before. FMW in Japan, for example, were well known for these kind of ultra-violent matchups, so seeing an exploding barbed wire match in a promotion like AEW was very, very intriguing. Even for company detractors, this one had the potential to get talked about for a very long time. Again, I thought the match was really good up until the end, because, you see, if the match reached the 30-minute mark, then the whole ring was gonna explode. Basically, every explosive would get detonated and wrestling ring go boom. The match featured Jon Moxley and Kenny Omega. It reached the 30-minute mark. Moxley's all alone in the ring. Eddie Kingston, a Wrestling Bios viewer by the way, so please take this well my friend, dashes down to the ring to cover Moxley in one of the most heroic and brave acts a man could possibly do. And then the ring exploded, with fireworks and nothing else. This earth-shattering explosion was comparable to a WWF wrestler's pyro during the New Generation era. It was a small step up from Goldberg's sparkler entrance. It was so bad that the company got quite a lot of flack and AEW had to come up with an explanation, fast. In the end, they went with Kenny Omega playing a big old prank and placing dud explosions around the ring. It was probably the best explanation they could have came up with, to be honest. The problem was, though, the commentators and Eddie had no choice but to play it off as legit when the quote-unquote explosion went off, so salvaging the bit was also kinda moot. Electrified cage matches had been done before by using jumper cables and electrocuting guys for real. It's incredibly dangerous, of course, so you're not going to see anything like that in promotions who have decent TV deals and sponsorships. You're also not going to get guys who actually care about their well-being doing such matches because, you know, you could get seriously hurt or you could even die if things went the wrong way. It kinda makes you wonder why TNA would book an electric cage match between Team 3D and LAX in the first place, but by god they did it and it sucked. Not only did we get some ridiculous acting when someone touched the cage, but we also got guys seemingly forgetting they had this electrified cage surrounding them. Wrestlers would perform moves as normal on the mat instead of throwing them into the cage, and Brother Ray even asked for a table to get put in the ring, because flimsy wood is 100 times more effective at hurting your opponent as opposed to 10,000 volts of electricity. Finally though, Hernandez remembered that this structure could actually do some real damage, so he tossed Devon into the cage and check it out. The lights flickered, there were no sparks or anything, no pyro, the lights just flickered and Devon flopped around like a fish. A pair of rubber gloves is all you need to climb the cage too. You can even sit on top of the cage with your balls touching it and you still won't get hurt. Homicide takes a bump into the cage too and it's just as bad as Devon's. A terrible match that makes the AEW Exploding Barbed Wire Death match look like a masterpiece. This is another one that sounds good on paper, but we've got a guy completely forgetting the rules and the match ends prematurely because of it. Even worse is the fact that it was Dean Malenko who dropped the ball, a guy who was always highly reliable. A lot of changes were made to WCW Sold Out 2000 due to injuries. Jeff Jarrett and Chris Benoit were originally going to face off in a triple threat theatre series of matches, with one of those matches being a Dungeon Rules match. The ropes would get removed and you could win via pinfall, submission, or throwing your opponent out of the ring. This match did sound good, but Benoit got put in the main event title match when Bret Hart had to forfeit the title while Double J was out due to a concussion. Billy Kidman would wrestle 3 different guys instead. The Dungeon match was replaced with a catch-as-catch-can match where the ropes would stay around the ring, but you could still lose if your feet touched the floor. Well, didn't Dean Malenko completely forget about this and he left the ring after about 2.5 minutes? Yeah, Dean went out to regroup and the referee had no choice but to award the victory to Billy Kidman. Dean's head wasn't in it at all. There was a lot of turmoil backstage and Dean was getting ready to leave the company along with Benoit and others. This catch-as-catch-can match would be his final match in WCW and it was such a bad way for him to go out after putting on good to great matches every time he stepped into a WCW ring. Alright, that'll do it for this one, but I have loads more to talk about, and as always, I'm open for suggestions. Let me know in the comments what gimmick matches you didn't like or what ideas fell flat when the bell rung, and I'll include them in a future video. Again, there may be some of these matches that you enjoyed, and that's okay. Trust me, there's matches out there that people like, but I do, so it's alright to have differing opinions. Use the comment section to let me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching guys, as always, and take care.
Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Are you ready? Come on, move in, now move out. Hands up, now hands down. Back up. Tell me what you gonna do now. Breathe in, now breathe out. Hands up, now hands down. Back up. Tell me what you gonna do now. Keep rolling, 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 rolling. Keep rolling, 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 rolling. Keep rolling, 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 rolling. Keep rolling, 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 rolling.
The Brothers of Destruction and DX, this is going to be a tough one. For fans of the Attitude Era and even afterwards, it didn't get any better than these two teams, and even if you weren't a fan of these guys, they were still very important in shaping the WWF or WWE and helping the company in terms of popularity. It's interesting how both teams began their on-screen relationships around the same time period, with Shawn, Hunter and The Undertaker all being present for the debut of the Kane character, and as those early days continued on, DX, Kane and Taker were all intertwined right up until the original DX collapsed in 1998. For many people, D-Generation X and the Brothers of Destruction were a part of their childhoods. All 4 men became cornerstones of WWE, and they had an insane amount of fan support whether they were good guys or bad guys. Quite simply, they were 4 legends of the company. Time moves on though, and time doesn't wait for anybody. As the WWE evolved over the years, so did the professional and personal lives of these 4 legends. Triple H became way more hands-on behind the scenes. Glenn Jacobs would become the mayor of Knox County. Shawn Michaels retired and he began working with the talent at NXT. And The Undertaker, well, the dead man was still competing in the ring, searching for a final match that would satisfy his desire to leave wrestling on a high note. In 2018, the idea of DX getting back together to face the Brothers of Destruction sounded impossible, mainly due to HBK's retirement and Glenn Jacobs getting so heavily involved in politics. But strange things can happen when the WWE go to Saudi Arabia, and indeed, it felt strange when a DX versus Brothers of Destruction match was announced for the Crown Jewel 2018 show. Let's take a look at what could only be described as a train wreck match that maybe shouldn't have happened at all on November 2nd, 2018. When The Undertaker retired Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 26, it felt a little bittersweet for many fans, including myself. HBK was still putting on incredible performances all the way up to 2010, even outperforming many of the younger main eventers on the roster, but Shawn thought it was time to go and he talked about ending his career on a high note. HBK stated the best way to go is to leave fans wanting more, and he didn't want to be another guy who couldn't perform the way he once did during the twilight years of his career. So while I, and I'm sure many others, wanted Shawn to hang around and have more matches, his decision to leave while still being the showstopper in the main event was understandable. Rumours began circulating during 2016 regarding a potential Shawn Michaels return. The 2017 Royal Rumble was being held in Shawn's hometown of San Antonio, Texas, inside the Alamo Dome. The event marked the 20th anniversary of Shawn beating Psycho Sid to reclaim the World Wrestling Federation Championship in the same venue. And the rumours went into overdrive when AJ tweeted out a pay-per-view mock-up featuring HBK and AJ standing in front of the San Antonio skyline. Unfortunately, this match didn't happen, but Shawn and AJ did talk about the potential matchup on Table for Three, a WWE Network show where superstars discuss practically anything while having dinner. What Shawn says to AJ is very fascinating, and we can learn a bit more about Shawn's mindset here when it came to returning for one more match. On the Table for Three show that featured Kevin Nash, AJ Styles and Shawn Michaels, AJ said he got interested in a Shawn Michaels match when he heard HBK was attending the Performance Center. AJ wanted the higher-ups to ask Shawn if he wanted to do something at the Royal Rumble. Nash said he saw AJ's tweet and thought the match would be sweet. And Shawn says that he too saw the graphic, and Shawn admired the fact that AJ was keeping his name out there by tweeting out the mock-up. HBK then revealed that writers had previously pitched ideas for Shawn to come back, but this Royal Rumble match in the Alamo Dome was actually pitched to Shawn by Vince McMahon himself. HBK liked the idea of wrestling styles. He rubbed his hands together while thinking about what kind of match the Heartbreak Kid and the Phenomenal One could potentially have, and what story they could tell in the ring. Shawn found it a fascinating prospect. He knew he and AJ would have to work their tails off, but ultimately Shawn admitted that he couldn't wrestle to the level he once could, and there's an awkward silence here when Shawn asks AJ and Nash who would go over in that match. Who wins an AJ Styles versus Shawn Michaels bout? If Shawn wins, it does nothing for AJ, and AJ doesn't look good. If AJ wins, then Shawn's legacy maybe gets further tarnished due to coming out of retirement just to take a loss in San Antonio. Plus, he thought it would be anticlimactic as well. AJ agrees with Michaels, saying it would be a risk to go out again after having such a good match with The Undertaker. And Shawn then says that he looks at the whole story arc of the Heartbreak Kid, from throwing Marty Jannetty through the glass at the barber shop to defying The Undertaker before the last Tombstone piledriver. HBK considers that whole stretch the story of his career. Another match would sit independently away from that whole arc, and it would also feel pointless. AJ compares this to the Rocky V movie, saying it was unnecessary. So, the big takeaway here is that Shawn felt a return match would need to fit into the story of his character, and it also sounds like Shawn didn't want to come back just to take another loss. We're going to come back to this soon. Creative and story arcs, of course, were not the only reason for working a show in Saudi Arabia, but more on this in a moment. Absolutely out of the blue, a match between Triple H and The Undertaker was announced for the Super Showdown 2018 event in Melbourne, Australia. Hunter came out to the ring on the August 20th, 2018 episode of Raw, and he said after watching SummerSlam he got the itch to lace up his boots again and once again be the game. He thought this would happen, and that's why when Vince called him a few weeks prior to pitch a match at Super Showdown, Hunter agreed. When Vince said this match would be against The Undertaker, the game wasn't so sure. The end of an era Hell in a Cell match he and Taker had meant a lot to Triple H, and when he, Shawn and Taker stood on the entranceway at the end of that match, it changed all three men. Shawn would disappear for good, The Undertaker's streak would eventually come to an end, and Triple H would put on a suit. The era really did end that night, and everything changed. Hunter thought about it, and he agreed to do the match only if The Undertaker agreed to be the Phenom one more time. A bygone era was gonna return. This Super Showdown match will feature The Undertaker in the game, and it'll be one last time. The following week, Shawn Michaels announced that he was going to Australia too so he can see the match in person. HBK then said The Undertaker's chances weren't so good this time around, seeing as The Undertaker's streak ended and some of that mystique has been taken away from the Phenom. Triple H, on the other hand, is still the game and still the cerebral assassin, and Triple H has a lot more left in the tank in comparison to The Undertaker. The dead man shows up, and Taker says Shawn just made this thing personal. Taker's already put Shawn and Hunter down and the degenerates can't accept it. Shawn only thinks Triple H is gonna win because Taker took away Shawn's career, and Shawn says he stayed away from the ring because he's a man of his word, because he respects the fans and because he respects The Undertaker. The crowd chants one more match, and Shawn says he hears that in every arena he goes to. He gets people asking him for one more match backstage. He turns down millions of dollars every year, and he's done it all out of respect for The Undertaker. Undertaker wonders if it's really respect or is it fear? Because if Shawn does come out of retirement, there's only one guy he can come after, and that's the dead man. And the dead man says he would put Shawn down again. HBK knows it, the fans know it, Taker knows it, but for now, Taker's gonna focus on putting Shawn's buddy down again at the Super Showdown event. This promo here was obviously the strongest hint so far that Michaels was planning to have another match, but it still in a way felt unlikely after what Shawn said in interviews following WrestleMania 26. If we go back to what Shawn said to AJ on Table for 3 within the context of storylines, it kinda made sense. Shawn versus The Undertaker again wouldn't feel independent from HBK's story arc. It would fit right in at the end, and it was simple yet brilliant. Shawn says he's staying away out of respect. Taker says Shawn's just afraid of him. So it's almost like Taker invited Shawn to come out of retirement and try his luck again. Over the next 2 weeks, it was revealed that Shawn Michaels was going to stand in Triple H's corner for the Melbourne match. So The Undertaker announced that Kane was going to return and stand in his corner. Kane had been active in WWE during late 2017 and early 2018, while making a few sporadic appearances through the year, but he was definitely winding down considerably to focus on a new career path. On the Raw before Super Showdown then, Shawn Michaels warned Kane not to step in the ring or get involved because the Big Red Machine will have to deal with the Heartbreak Kid. Kane then appeared behind Michaels and Shawn got floored after a big right hand. The lights then went out in the arena, and The Undertaker then stood over Shawn when the lights came back on. Undertaker was just about to tombstone Shawn, but Triple H ran to the ring. The game fought both Brothers of Destruction, but on this night, DX weren't good enough. Shawn and Hunter take chokeslams, and The Undertaker decides to tombstone Triple H for good measure before leaving the ring with his little brother. Super Showdown was already getting panned by critics and fans before the event even took place, and that's because it was sandwiched between Hell in a Cell in September and Evolution in October. It felt superfluous to a lot of fans, and it just added to an already bloated WWE calendar. Triple H versus The Undertaker should have felt like a bigger deal, and had the match taken place at WrestleMania, then it might have felt a bit more important. But the WWE decided to do it at this show, and so did the game, and so did the Phenom. HBK couldn't help himself. He jumped on the apron a few times and he distracted The Undertaker more than once. He would then get physical with the dead man, and Kane would have to try and stop Shawn while also trying to maintain some order. Soon though, Kane would get more involved and he would try to make things difficult for Hunter. So Kane ended up taking sweet chin music and Triple H put the Big Red Machine through a table. The Undertaker gets the better of Hunter and Shawn was forced to watch his friend take a few hard chair shots. Michaels tried to reason with The Undertaker, and when that didn't work, Michaels got inside the ring and he got punched in the nose. Still though, all this bought Triple H enough time to hit a spine buster, but Taker kicked out of the cover. Shawn handed Triple H his sledgehammer, Kane passed a chair to The Undertaker. Hunter waxed the chair and the chair waxed the Phenom, but there's no referee to count the pinfall. In the end, Kane and Shawn get in the ring. Kane gets taken out with a low blow. The Undertaker tries to tombstone Michaels, but he takes a sledgehammer shot from Triple H, leading to HBK performing the super kick, and Triple H ends it with a pedigree. It was a bit messy, and it was, without a doubt, the weakest Undertaker versus Triple H match to ever take place on pay-per-view, with all the interference truly hurting the overall flow of the the match. But it was done like this for a reason. It looks like DX and the Brothers of Destruction are gonna let bygones be bygones as D-Generation X help the brothers to their feet for a celebration. But Kane and Taker then attack DX and it's made clear that this isn't over. Triple H gets tombstoned and HBK gets put through a commentary table. Triple H and Shawn Michaels opened up Raw the following night and they talked about respect. Hunter talked about how he respected Shawn Michaels, how Shawn showed respect by sticking to his word and staying retired even when everyone else wanted him to wrestle, and HBK talked about how your respect for someone can change over time. Shawn had a long think about Super Showdown on the flight back from Australia. He thought about how he honoured his word not to wrestle out of a respect that didn't even exist. So when the flight landed, Triple H asked HBK a question. Are you ready? Hunter knows that Shawn's ready, but he wonders if the Brothers of Destruction are ready for D-Generation X at Crown Jewel. Shawn and Hunter reveal their D-Generation X shirts and they bring a formal return to the faction here. And fans pop when they realise that HBK maybe just announced his return to the ring. Later in the show, Michael Cole makes it official when he announces the match along with a match graphic, and then the internet went into overdrive. Remember how Shawn talked about his return having to be right creatively and it had to make sense for him to want to come back? Well, all that was thrown out the window because something that can't be argued is the fact that a lot of money was and still is involved in these Saudi Arabia shows. No matter what you may think of these shows, it's no secret that superstars who make these one-off appearances at these kind of events get paid very well. Fans didn't give a shit about any creative reasons for Shawn coming out of retirement. There were zero discussions about the AJ Styles conversation at Table for Three. It went straight to money and politics. And hey, you gotta admit too, even the most diehard of HBK fans had to look at this and see it for what it was. Shawn's opinion and reasoning has changed over the years. He stated it wasn't breaking his retirement vow and it was like a band getting back together for one night to have fun. He also said he could have earned a lot more money doing a singles match at WrestleMania instead of a tag match in Saudi Arabia, while also stating there wouldn't be another chance for all four of these guys involved to get together and have this bout. I think that's bullshit, by the way, because all four men were just back from Melbourne, Australia. But anyway, in short, HBK said it wasn't about the money. He didn't want to be in a tough position at WrestleMania where he's expected to wrestle a 5-star match against a younger guy. According to Michaels, it was just for fun. It was an opportunity that Michaels thought would never come up, and that's why he agreed to do it. Take from that what you will, it's completely your call, but you have to admit it's a little hard to believe, and trust me, I'm a huge HBK fan. I really wanted to see Shawn wrestle again, but I was kinda shocked when the match was announced. Crown Jewel 2018 also would end up surrounded in a lot of controversy, and there were calls for the show to get completely cancelled, but it went ahead and HBK, Kane, Triple H and Undertaker all performed in the main event. The circumstances, the location, the timing, all that overshadowed the in-ring return of one of WWE's greatest ever superstars. And again, gonna be honest, the WWE and Shawn Michaels should have known this was gonna happen. Also, just a little side note, it's okay to have mixed feelings about this. You could be a big HBK fan and still not agree with him coming back at Crown Jewel, it's fine. And it's also fine to have a hard stance on the matter, but don't feel bad if you're unsure how to feel about it. Not everything's black and white, particularly in the world of professional wrestling. The following week, a pre-tape promo aired featuring Kane and The Undertaker. The dead man repeated that it wasn't respect that kept Michaels retired, it was HBK's fear of the Reaper. Kane said Shawn was afraid of humiliation, the humiliation of getting defeated again by The Undertaker. But at Crown Jewel, when D-Generation X faced the Brothers of Destruction for the very first time, all of Shawn's fears will come true. A war will begin and end at Crown Jewel. Triple H can go back to the boardroom after his defeat and Shawn can shuffle back to the safety of retirement. DX had 3 words for the brothers, are you ready? The brothers have 3 words for DX, rest in peace. On The Undertaker's Last Ride documentary, there's a great outtake of this promo where the Phenom had 3 different words for Hunter and Shawn.
Go yourself.
The week after, Taker and Kane interrupted an in-ring DX promo. The brothers were seen in a graveyard and Taker said the DX reunion will serve as the vessel for the team's total annihilation. DX should have stayed away, they can't turn back the clock. They can't outrun the Reaper and they can't survive the Brothers of Destruction. Kane and Taker then reveal HBK and Triple H's tombstones, and they tell Shawn and Hunter that DX will never rest in peace. It was DX though who got the last laugh during the build-up. Triple H interrupted a Brothers of Destruction promo this time and he lured Kane away from the ring, allowing HBK to hit Taker with sweet chin music. Taker sat up afterwards and DX got a little shaken up, but HBK showed everyone that he still had the ability to put The Undertaker down if the right opportunity presented itself. Alright, let's do it. Let's look at the match. A prime example of why some things are best left alone. It took a little time, but Shawn Michaels did finally say that he regretted performing in this match, but he only regretted it because he didn't know The Undertaker was trying to end his career with a great bout. HBK apologized to Taker, Kane and Triple H when he realized The Undertaker was seeking his final match, but trust me, if you haven't seen this yet, Shawn Michaels ends up being the best performer of the match. He has his bad moments too, just like everyone else, but in comparison to his dance partners, he didn't come out of it looking all that bad. The bad match is maybe not the most disappointing thing about all this, and it's maybe more about the fact that they allowed themselves to have the bad match in the first place. But enough of all that, you can be the judge here. Shawn and Hunter are wearing hybrid DX and NXT gear that I thought looked great, the old guard representing the new blood. And the stadium looks absolutely brilliant when the Brothers of Destruction make their way down to the ring. Loads of stalling at the beginning of the match, loads of shit talking. It settles down to Kane and Triple H, and Hunter starts it off by punching Kane in the face. He then counters in the corner and he tries to crotch chop, or chop his crotch, whatever, and Kane punches right back. Triple H stops Kane from tagging in the dead man. He gets the crowd fired up when he points to HBK. Shawn gets the tag, the crowd pops, and Michaels comes off the top rope with a double axe handle. HBK performs a swinging neckbreaker that he seems very proud of, but Kane sets up and Shawn almost gets chokeslammed. Kane then counters a sunset flip. He goes for a tombstone, but Shawn reverses and he feigns a super kick. He laughs at Kane and he says he could have had him just then, but the brothers aren't in the mood for jokes tonight. Kane tags in The Undertaker and Shawn loses his smile when he has to face the Reaper for the first time since Mania 26. Triple H tells Shawn to go after the dead man. The Undertaker performs his cutthroat taunt and Shawn tells Taker to suck it. Michaels gets in a few chops, but he goes down after a big boot. Taker then softens up the arm and shoulder for old school, but Triple H runs in to stop the dead man, and this leads to Kane jumping in too. All four men fight in the ring. Shawn gets hung up in the Tree of Woe. Kane throws Triple H into Shawn, and then disaster struck. While taking this bump, Hunter falls out of the ring and he tears his pectoral muscle, the same injury that more recently put Cody Rhodes on the shelf. You can see here how bad the injury was after the match, but even when watching the bout, you knew something was up. Shawn gets dumped out of the ring too so he can check on his teammate. The brothers wait in the ring to buy some time and get a damage report, and it's not good. HBK was likely relying on Triple H in this match, but Hunter's hurt, and Shawn, the guy who's been retired, might have to put in an extra bit of work tonight. Hunter's not completely out. He's going to do what he can, but he can't really use his right arm. He tries to chop with his left arm before sending Kane and Taker out of the ring, and the referee checks on Hunter while the cameras focus on HBK. Back inside the ring, Shawn takes old school while Triple H looks like he's in absolute agony at the ring steps. HBK gets choked in the corner, but he manages to dodge a big boot. Hunter gets tagged in, and again he uses the left arm to chop the Phenom. Taker puts Hunter down with a clothesline. He brings the game over to the Brothers of Destruction's corner where Kane gets tagged in, and nobody really knows what to do. Hunter decides he's going to take a slam and he rolls away from an elbow drop afterwards. The referee rushes to Triple H to see if he's okay. He gets up and he trades strikes with Kane, even using his right arm for a punch and looking like he instantly regrets it afterwards. He then hits a DDT before conceding and he tags out. The pace quickens up when HBK lands his signature flying forearm and he smiles after performing the kip up. He tries to slam Kane, but that doesn't go too well, neither does the suplex counter that follows. Hunter comes back in for a double suplex that DX also struggle with, but Shawn goes upstairs and he turns back the clock with his diving elbow drop. HBK warms up the band for sweet chin music. You can hear him shout "Come on, Glenn" when Kane takes a bit too long turning around, Kane counters Sweet Chin Music with a chokeslam, and then The Undertaker comes back in to punish Shawn in the corner. Taker performs Snake Eyes, a big boot and a leg drop. Hunter stops Taker from hitting a chokeslam so Shawn can nail Taker with a super kick, but still Taker sits up before Shawn and the match goes to the outside. Hunter saves Shawn from getting tombstoned on the announce table, and Hunter also performs this rough looking whip into the security barrier. That arm must have been totally out of action at this point. Kane makes Triple H pay with a chokeslam through the announce table, and that's going to be Hunter put out of action until the end of the match. From here, Shawn takes a beating from the Brothers of Destruction. Frequent tags from the brothers lead to Shawn taking a suplex and a sidewalk slam, and in between all this we have the usual punches, kicks and chokeholds. The stadium wasn't loud to begin with, but it's nearly silent at this point, and it feels like the excitement of the match just isn't there, and the guys in the ring really aren't doing a whole lot to get the audience back into it. Shawn manages to stop a Kane top rope attack, and the big red machine slowly falls off the top rope. He then throws Taker into the ring post on the outside, and things then get comically bad when Shawn knocks Kane's mask off with a single punch. The camera zooms in on Michaels while Kane gets his mask back, and then what should have been a great moment in the match gets ruined by a poor landing when HBK moonsaults from the top to the outside. You can see the disappointment in Michaels' face, and Taker puts a hand on his chest as if to say, yeah, sorry about that. At this point, it's completely fallen apart, and you can sense everyone involved knows it's bad. Shawn tags in Hunter, and Triple H can't even run the ropes properly now as he delivers his signature facebreaker knee smash, and when he hits the Harley Race knee, the commentators have no choice but to address the injury. Still, he's able to hit a spinebuster on The Undertaker, and he counters a tombstone with a pedigree. He goes for the cover, Taker applies Hell's Gate, and the move gets broken up when Kane falls on his partner after taking Sweet Chin Music. All four men are down. The brothers then sit up and they look absolutely fucking wrecked as they get to their feet. They go for tandem tombstones, but a rake to the eyes from Shawn and a low blow from Triple H leads to both brothers getting super kicked, and Triple H pulls off an awful looking pedigree to end the match. Hunter and Shawn hug in the corner and they talk about the match. You can sense some relief here, and you can also sense that Triple H is seriously hurt. Not gonna lie, I felt let down after the match, as did many others. You don't know what to expect really, but this was definitely below expectations.
I want the love.
Big Batista. Some people love him, others aren't so keen. Personally, I don't mind Batista at all, and I can remember a time when fans couldn't get enough of the animal, but boy, did he ever get tore a new one when he made his comeback in 2014. I always thought Dave was just a victim of circumstance during this WWE return, and he was also the victim of the WWE's own bad decision making and their inability to see something that was pretty much right in front of their faces. But I'll explain all this in today's video. Let's take a look at Batista's WWE return in 2014, a return that even Dave himself wasn't too pleased with. At WrestleMania 21 back in 2005, Batista closed the show by becoming World Heavyweight Champion. This kind of achievement isn't handed out lightly, especially back then, and winning a main championship in Mania's final match is something only a select few can ever say they've accomplished. It tells us that WWE were invested in Batista, and right enough, he did remain a top player until he decided to leave 5 years later. Batista spoke candidly about the creative direction WWE was going in. He wasn't a fan of the PG era, and to him, the WWE wasn't the same company it once was when he made his debut. He also wanted to get into movies, and he would end up landing a few notable roles. In 2013, he played Diaz in the movie Riddick, but even bigger than that was his role as Drax the Destroyer in Guardians of the Galaxy, due to get released in 2014. Towards the end of post-production, Batista decided to come back to WWE. Many people have wrongfully stated that Batista's return was all about promoting the movie, but Guardians was hardly mentioned on WWE TV when Batista came back, except for odd little mentions by the commentators. So this seemed more like something Batista wanted to do on a personal level rather than something he was being forced to do. Of course, making his name fresh again on weekly television wouldn't hurt matters, and reminding WWE fans of who he was wasn't a bad idea. Guardians of the Galaxy would surpass expectations, the movie got great reviews, it became the big summer blockbuster of 2014, but the Batista WWE return earlier in the year was the complete opposite. At the very end of 2013, the WWE began playing videos on their weekly shows letting everyone know that Batista was coming back. Not gonna lie, I was looking forward to the animal making his return, and I remember others looking forward to it too. You can take a look back at posts online during these couple of weeks, and there were some fans who were hyped to see Batista make his return, though not a lot of people would like to admit that in hindsight. Batista would show up on the January 20th, 2014 episode of Raw where he confronted Randy Orton, and he also promised to win the Royal Rumble. And then the problems began. There were a lot of fans looking forward to Batista's return, but those same fans didn't necessarily want him to win the Royal Rumble. That was maybe a step too far. You see, around this time period, a guy named Daniel Bryan had only gone and made himself one of the most popular superstars in the entire business. And what's more, Daniel Bryan's popularity wasn't manufactured or even planned by the company. Bryan's push was very organic and he became the people's choice. It was actually incredible how fans took to him. And Daniel's 2013 and 2014 run is something I want to cover in a separate video, but in short, fans wanted Daniel to headline WrestleMania, not a guy who disappeared and came back again. Take Daniel Bryan out of the equation too, and WWE still got a pretty big problem if they want a guy like Batista winning the Royal Rumble. There's only a select few legends in the company that fans have allowed to come back and jump straight into the main event scene upon their return. Guys like Steve Austin, Shawn Michaels, even The Rock had a few detractors when he came back to face John Cena. But you've got to be a special legend to just waltz back in and claim spots that many fans believe should go to guys on the current full-time roster. Batista was great during his early days in the company. He was a former world and WWE champion. He headlined a ton of pay-per-views, but he wasn't on the same level as others who came back for a brief stint. Anyway, Batista also confronted Alberto Del Rio later in the night. Del Rio had been ripping Dave apart in the run-up to his big return, so Alberto took a Batista bomb and the crowd popped. Still, fans were a little anxious heading into the Royal Rumble later in the week, and already the vast majority of fans were hoping that Daniel Bryan would rise to the occasion and claim his spot in the Mania main event. Not a lot of people wanted Batista to win the Royal Rumble. Also, the fact that Batista wore skinny jeans on Raw seemed to be a talking point for many fans, seriously, and this wouldn't be the last time Batista's dress sense was brought up during this return. The WWE released a great half-hour documentary that covered Batista's return at the Royal Rumble, and we got to see him backstage before the event. He's absolutely stressed out, he's a nervous wreck, he has issues with his gear, he can't stop to enjoy the moment and enjoy what lies ahead of him. It honestly looks like he's putting himself through torture before even stepping out into the arena. Batista came in at number 28, and when fans realised Daniel Bryan wasn't even taking part in the Rumble match, the audience completely turned on Dave. Roman Reigns was the last man eliminated, and fans weren't very big on Roman either during this time period, yet they still cheered for Reigns when, in reality, everyone knew that Batista was just going to win this thing. Daniel Bryan had wrestled earlier in the night. He lost to Bray Wyatt in a match that I feel is kinda underrated, and it's one of my favourite Daniel Bryan matches to watch during this era. But fans were expecting Bryan to surprise everyone, enter the Royal Rumble, and win the whole thing. When that didn't happen, it was Batista who took the blame. This wasn't Batista's fault, of course. The WWE knew Daniel was wide hot, and even if they knew what they were doing and they were playing the long game to boost Bryan's underdog story, it was still a horrifically bad move because now you've went ahead and destroyed Batista and the fans' perception of Batista. Dave said in interviews that he wanted to come in as a heel, and the fans' reaction towards him actually hurt Batista on a personal level because he wanted to let fans know his comeback had all the best intentions. But fans were enraged. They started a fucking cancel WWE Network trend. They threatened to boycott shows, and Batista felt that the fans weren't just booing him as a character, but they booed him because they just didn't want him to be there. In saying that, when the Rumble went off the air, he decided to rub it in a little by flipping the fans off, and he made fun of Daniel Bryan too, but I'm guessing he just didn't know what to do after getting such a harsh reaction. On that documentary I was talking about, Batista said his biggest worry about the Royal Rumble was potentially letting the fans down, but the way this was laid out, there was absolutely no way the fans wouldn't be let down whether Batista was involved or not. So the WWE had a big problem on their hands. Fans had completely rejected the winner of the Royal Rumble. I'm going to be honest here, I always thought that Daniel Bryan was going to win the championship at Mania, even as far back as the Royal Rumble. And even after Batista won the Rumble, I still thought that Bryan was somehow still going to get that big Mania moment. I'm not sure how far back WWE knew this too, but they sure did play up to it well after the Rumble match. Though again, I want to cover all the Daniel Bryan stuff in a separate video. Batista's crowd reaction was a problem. The next night on Raw, Batista got booed again. He told WWE World Champion Randy Orton that he was leaving WrestleMania with the gold and nothing was going to change that, and that just annoyed fans even more. WWE would have been wise to turn Batista heel as soon as possible really, but they put him in a short mini feud against Alberto Del Rio. The following week, Del Rio attacked Batista, and then the week after that, Batista got revenge by powerbombing Del Rio through a table, but the reactions weren't getting any better. As a matter of fact, fans were now taking delight in ripping Batista apart, and hey, I don't think it's because fans actually despise Dave Batista, they just absolutely adore Daniel Bryan. Batista was on a path that fans felt Bryan should have been on, and on more than one occasion, Batista just had to tell fans to deal with it, it's their problem. The boos continued at the Elimination Chamber show when Batista met Del Rio in a singles match. Fans were now calling Dave Boo-tista, and the negative reactions continued the night after Elimination Chamber, where Batista once again defeated Alberto Del Rio. It was bad, it really was, and the WWE finally relented and they let Batista turn heel. Daniel Bryan had managed to get himself involved in the WrestleMania main event. He had to beat Triple H on the show of shows to get a chance at the WWE World Championship. If Bryan beat Hunter, the main event would become a triple threat encounter featuring champion Randy Orton, Dave Batista, and Daniel Bryan. So if Bryan was going to win the big one at Mania, he sure would have all the odds stacked against him. Batista turning heel wasn't only good for the Mania main event, but it was also good for Batista. So, on the 20th of February 2014 episode of SmackDown, Batista cut a promo in the ring where he said he loved the wrestling business and he loved WWE. He didn't come back to get cheered, he came back to win the WWE World Championship. Batista could destroy anyone on the roster. He's the best representative of WWE alive today, and that includes Hulk Hogan and The Rock. And then Batista wonders what happened to the real man of WWE, what happened to the attitude. Fans cheer for 195-pound wannabes who'll never be as good as Batista. Everything about Batista screams WWE World Champion, and from this point on, Batista will systematically destroy every one of these fans' favourite heroes on his road to WrestleMania. On the 3rd of March episode of Raw, during a backstage interview, Batista ripped into fans once again, and he again spoke badly of the current roster. Batista can't believe the guys who pass as WWE superstars in 2014, and he thinks the fans are watching too many movies and reading too many comics because average guys like Daniel Bryan don't become superheroes. Daniel Bryan will never be like Dave Batista, and the fans will just have to deal with it. Later that night, Batista wrestled Bryan in the Raw main event. The fans chanted, "You can't wrestle" at Batista. The match would get stopped due to Randy Orton's interference, but Batista ended up doing the Authority a favour. He took Bryan out with a spear. He then let Triple H send a message to Bryan about Daniel's little WrestleMania fantasy coming to an end. And when Bryan fought back, Batista hit him with a Batista bomb, which again left Daniel vulnerable. Hunter hits Bryan with a pedigree, and so the full Batista heel turn had been completed. Batista went into WrestleMania 30 not fully aligned with Randy Orton, but he certainly disliked Bryan a whole lot more than the current champion. It's incredible to think that at one point the WWE were maybe banking on Batista to make Mania 30 more memorable, and by the end of the show he pretty much became the last person anyone was talking about. Mania 30's remembered for two things: the end of The Undertaker's undefeated streak and Daniel Bryan defying the odds and winning the WWE World Championship. The Triple H vs Daniel Bryan opening match was great. The two put on a top WrestleMania opening match, and you could tell during this bout that the fans were going to go crazy if Bryan won the championship in the main event. Bryan defeated the game, so the main event got changed to a triple threat match. During the main event, Randy Orton and Batista had no problems fighting with each other, but one of the better spots in the match came when the old Evolution teammates joined forces for a powerbomb RKO spot. Fans had no choice but to applaud when that move was pulled off. In the end, it was Batista who topped out and Daniel Bryan became champion, giving fans a feel-good WrestleMania moment that's now remembered as the Miracle on Bourbon Street. Dave was due to hang around WWE for another while yet, and really, the company had to work out what to do next, so they decided to go back to the past and bring back the stable that helped Batista rise up the ranks. On the Raw after WrestleMania, both Batista and Randy Orton wanted a singles rematch against Daniel Bryan, but Triple H said he was going to deal with Bryan his way. And Hunter also reminded Orton and Batista that when the three of them are on the same page, they're unstoppable. Batista and Orton destroyed the Usos later in the evening. They opted to beat the hell out of their opponents on the outside and they got disqualified. And then, later on, the two attacked Daniel Bryan before the new champ was supposed to face Triple H in a title match. Corporate Kane got in on the action too, and then Triple H came to the ring to make the cover and become the new WWE World Champion. The Shield then appeared from the audience. They stood on one side of the ring while Orton, Batista and Kane stood on the other. Triple H tried to play peacemaker, but Roman hit Hunter with a spear, and then an all-out war broke out in the ring. Daniel Bryan and the Shield get the better of the Authority, and Raw ends with Triple H promising to get revenge. On the 14th of April 2014 episode of Raw, WWE tried to turn back the clock and bring back one of the most dominant factions of the Ruthless Aggression era. Daniel Bryan wasn't in the arena, but the Shield were. Triple H reminded Batista and Orton that together the three of them were unstoppable and they'd have more than enough to handle the Shield. But Randy and Batista didn't really care about forming an alliance. They wanted their shot at the WWE World Championship. Later on in the evening, the Shield attacked Batista and Randy during another tag team match with the Usos, and after the bout, Triple H just looked at his old teammates and he said, "Told ya," before walking off. The Shield were then booked in a 3-on-11 handicap match as punishment for their actions the week prior. Ambrose, Reigns and Rollins had no chance at all and they ended up getting destroyed within a few minutes. And then fans could hear that familiar sound of a clock ticking. The Evolution logo appeared on the Titantron as Motorhead's Line in the Sand played in the arena, and out walks Batista, Triple H and Randy Orton. Evolution were back, and that meant Batista was back in the heel faction that pretty much made him years prior. The Shield take another beating, and Triple H tells Roman Reigns to believe in Evolution. The crowd boos as Evolution celebrate to close out Raw, and now the Shield and the whole WWE had a problem. The following week, we got the boys back in their sharp dress clothes, the swagger was back, the better than you attitude was back, Evolution had truly returned, and Triple H's proteges were more dangerous than ever now that they had successful careers behind them. It was like Evolution had finally evolved. The thing is though, and again, just being honest, nobody cared. Well, that may be a bit harsh. The reformation of Evolution didn't carry as much weight as what I think Triple H and the WWE had hoped. Hunter was already doing this authority thing, so essentially his role didn't change. Randy Orton was already a heel leading up to this reunion, and we have already learned everything about Batista's comeback so far. I don't know, you just expect it to be more, and it just didn't get the same hype you'd expect from a faction reunion. Evolution had a bit of a reputation with fans too, especially fans on the internet, the whole reign of terror and all that business. Evolution's a group that not many fans go out of their way to praise, even though it created two legitimate WWE main eventers. So my guess is that most fans, not all, but most just didn't want to see the faction again because there wasn't a whole lot they could now offer. Also, there's no Ric Flair here, but we'll get to the Nature Boy in a moment. As it would turn out, however, Evolution reformed not only to give Batista and Orton something to do, but they reformed to help the Shield get over. Nature Boy Ric Flair made a surprise appearance on the April 28th episode of Raw, and the boys in Evolution were happy to see Slick Rick make his return. Flair, however, surprised his old teammates when he backed the Shield instead of Evolution. Flair said he rolled with the Four Horsemen for years, the Horsemen controlled the marketplace as did Evolution, but Flair is seeing greatness come full circle. Tonight, Flair's surrounded by superstars who exemplify power, style and grace. But Flair's talking about the Shield tonight and not his former faction buddies. Flair shook hands with Rollins, Reigns and Ambrose, and he left the ring while leaving Evolution quite confused. The Nature Boy gave the Shield a big endorsement, and the fans didn't know what to make of it, neither did the Shield for that matter. If you're going to bring back Evolution, then, in my opinion, Flair should have been part of it, or at least he should, give his old faction the thumbs up instead of siding with the enemy for absolutely no reason at all. Nothing comes of this, by the way. Flair leaves the ring and he doesn't get involved in the angle again. From here, Evolution would have 2 matches against the Shield on pay-per-view, and the Shield were victorious in both matches. In this era, the Shield were the guys people wanted to root for, and indeed, times had changed quite a lot since Evolution ran the show week in and week out. So really, fans of Evolution can't complain. The old guard's supposed to make the young guys look good, and that's exactly what happened in these 2 matches. At Extreme Rules, Evolution were defeated in a 6-man tag when Roman Reigns speared Batista for the pinfall victory. There was a great moment in the match when Seth Rollins dived from the stands onto Randy and Triple H, and the next match then was scheduled to take place at WWE Payback. Triple H said the gloves were off this time and Evolution were going to pick the Shield apart one by one, so the Payback encounter would be an elimination match. The reason why I needed to cover everything here right up to the end of Evolution's short run was because of this. Dave Batista's ring gear at Payback 2014. Batista wore all blue, which would have been fine, but in this match everyone else wore black, so Batista kinda stood out, and he also wore those big blue arm sleeves. This, ladies and gentlemen, also caused the internet to go into a frenzy. I'm fairly certain a large portion of fans won't remember a thing about the match itself, but everyone remembers Batista's ring gear, and yeah, it did look out of place. Normally, I couldn't care less about ring attires and all that, but I do remember saying, why is he wearing that back when I watched this live? Dave's name would change from Batista to Blue-tista on this evening. So we have Boo-tista and Blue-tista. Kinda makes you think that fans weren't taking the animal all that seriously in 2014, doesn't it? The memes then came rolling in and the gear became quite iconic. Collectors could also eventually pick up an Elite Blue-tista action figure if they wanted to. It took on a life of its own and Blue-tista even trended on Twitter the night of Payback. WWE announced it during the match. Dave didn't take all this too well, to say the least. He took to Twitter and he wrote, 6 guys go to war and beat the shit out of each other, and what did the genius Smarks walk away with? Batista wore blue, what a loser, hashtag dipshits. And look, I kinda agree with Dave to an extent here, and we should be more focused on what goes on in the ring and not what these big sweaty dudes are wearing in the ring, but I don't think complaining about it on Twitter and getting triggered about it did him any favours. It's just fans being humorous on social media, and it's just fans enjoying the show. It's only ring gear. But yeah, the blue gear didn't give Dave any superhuman powers or anything like that. The Shield completely wiped Evolution out. Not a single member of the Shield got eliminated in this tag team match, and Evolution put the new guys over as they should. The match was also very good, and I'd forgotten how fun it was until I watched it back for this video. I'm a fan of Evolution and I've no hesitations in saying so, but I came to terms with the faction being pretty much over after the first few weeks of this reunion. The crowds didn't react, the majority of online fans couldn't have cared less, so yeah, it wasn't all that great and it's probably best left forgotten. Dave would leave WWE to focus on promoting Guardians of the Galaxy. He was due to come back, but again, the creative vision WWE had for him didn't quite align with what Batista wanted. To write Dave off, he demanded his WWE World title match and Triple H wouldn't give it to him. He couldn't give it to him, seeing as Daniel Bryan was injured, so Batista literally waved bye-bye to Triple H and WWE the night after Payback. Funnily enough, Triple H told Batista not to come crawling back when his new movie crops out. Guardians ended up doing really well at the box office, as mentioned earlier, and it kinda makes you think that WWE should have handled Batista's turn a little better in 2014. In a nutshell, and in my own opinion, the comeback announcement was great, the Royal Rumble victory was a disaster, the heel turn worked and the idea of reforming Evolution was good, but it turned out to be very underwhelming. Batista wears blue, fans laugh, and Batista says goodbye. When asked about this run, Batista said, It was horrible. I tried to not take it personally, but I really did. And it hurt because it's hard to tell people that you want to be there for the right reasons, but they don't want to hear it. They just don't care why you're there, they just don't want you there. It was a hard thing for me to do, and it was harder for me to leave because I felt that I was starting to connect with the audience. I felt I was where I wanted to be, and we were pushing the personal stuff aside. I was kind of getting past that, but I had to leave. I had to go promote Guardians of the Galaxy. Batista's story, fortunately, doesn't end here though. He wanted to leave the company on a high note, and he'd get the opportunity to do so at WrestleMania 35 in a match against Triple H, and that return I felt was handled a lot better. So yeah, that's it really. The main problem in 2014 was the Royal Rumble victory, without a doubt. If it wasn't Batista, it would have been someone else, so I really don't blame him for how things went during this run. The WWE really should have known better with how hot Daniel Bryan was during this time period. Thanks for watching guys, I hope you enjoyed this one, and take care.
In the mid-80s, the AWA became a distant third when competing against the WWF and the NWA. In 1987, the company was in survival mode, and in order to try and stay competitive, a relationship was formed between AWA promoter Vern Gagne and Memphis-based CWA promoter Jerry Jarrett. The King of Memphis, Jerry Lawler, would become the AWA champion after defeating Curt Hennig in May of 1988, and so Vern had hoped that this relationship could create a viable alternative to what was going on in other bigger promotions. World Class Championship Wrestling were also having some financial problems. Vern welcomed the Dallas-based promotion into his new little club, and so Vern's AWA, Jarrett's CWA, and the Von Erichs WCCW were all now allies, and they had a chance to create something special in order to compete with the big dogs. It all made perfect sense. The AWA had promoted Super Clash shows in the past, with Super Clash 1 featuring stars from the AWA, NWA and World Class competing inside the ring. The first Super Clash was a direct response to WrestleMania 1, which was held a few months prior, and not only did the show draw a respectable 20,000 people to Comiskey Park in Chicago, but the event itself was also pretty decent. Compare it to WrestleMania 1 in terms of ring work, and it's hard for anyone to say that the inaugural WrestleMania was better. NWA superstars competed at the first Super Clash along with Vern Gagne's AWA stars. However, a pay dispute would lead to the NWA cutting ties with the AWA. Jim Crockett claimed that the show earned nearly 300 grand, while Vern said it was only around 200 grand. The NWA promoter felt that the AWA promoter was withholding quite a lot of money. So while the show itself was pretty good, the fallout from the event was really bad. Super Clash 2, taking place in the Cow Palace in San Francisco, featured mainly AWA stars, so there's not much to talk about here. But Super Clash 3 went back to being a legit supercard featuring superstars from many different promotions. What's more, Super Clash 3 would be the first ever AWA show that was put on pay-per-view. It was gonna be the AWA's Hail Mary against the WWF and the NWA, a way to put the organisation back on the map while also elevating the other promotions involved in the show. Jerry Lawler also stated that one of the reasons why Super Clash 3 was put on pay-per-view was that hopefully a network would see how successful it was, and in turn, the AWA could get a weekly show on cable television. Turns out Super Clash 3 would be a complete disaster with low attendance numbers, a low buy rate, a ton of bad matches, promoters who didn't trust each other, and another fallout that concerned Vern Gagne allegedly holding back money from the other promotions involved. Triple H said it best really. Super Clash 3 was like watching 3 sinking ships jumping onto one ship so they could all sink together. So let's take a quick look at the show and see where it all went wrong. The third Super Clash may not be a great wrestling show, but it's one of those events that's quite important when considering the entire history of the business. One of those events that I feel every wrestling fan should at least know about. It's December 13th, 1988. Super Clash 3 takes place in the UIC Pavilion in Chicago. Kinda funny, seeing as WCW's Chi-Town Rumble would take place in the same venue a few months later, and that particular event is gained legendary status thanks to its main event. The big match of this show will be a title versus title match, AWA champion Jerry Lawler versus World Class champion Kerry Von Erich. And this is a match I've watched a few times now, and it is good, so at least we've got that to look forward to. We've got 1,672 fans in attendance, a dire number right here that does make you wonder why they didn't hold this event in Memphis, Dallas, or somewhere down south instead of Chicago. Around 45,000 bought the show on pay-per-view, and just for comparison's sake, the WWF Survivor Series a few weeks prior pulled in an estimated 310,000 pay-per-view buys. Starrcade 88 would do 150,000 buys. We have Ray Stevens and Lee Marshall serving as our commentators. Vern Gagne and David McLean of POWW will join these two throughout the show. And our opening match sees Los Guerreros, Chavo, Mando and Hector, taking on the Rock and Roll RPMs and Cactus Jack. The RPMs consist of future WWF and WCW jobber Mike Davis and Tommy Lane. Mick Foley had only been competing professionally for a few years at this point, and quite early on we see what he's made of when he takes a backdrop on the floor, though really Los Guerreros are the stars of the opening match, mainly Hector Guerrero who flips, rolls and jumps around the ring. Chavo Classic's no slouch either, and it's Chavo who ends up getting the win for his team after a moonsault. But the RPMs did practically nothing but show off their ridiculous haircuts. Interesting to see a young Cactus Jack. The Guerreros were fun to watch. The RPM sucked, and in general, the match was just okay. I wouldn't call it terrible, but it was just okay. You may notice this lady getting interviewed backstage. Her name is Nina. She represents the Powerful Women of Wrestling organization, and she'd compete a decade later in the WWF as Ivory. Before this, Nina worked in Glow as Tina Ferrari, and tonight she's competing in a POW lingerie battle royal for 10 grand. She says the match may not be too pretty, and trust me folks, that's an understatement. Next up, we have Jeff Jarrett, the world-class light heavyweight champion, even though he's a Memphis boy, taking on the flamboyant Eric Embry. They spelled flamboyant wrong, and old Eric didn't look too flamboyant at all, did he? I'm just thinking too, every main promoter involved in Super Clash has their kids working on the show. Jeff Jarrett, Kerry Von Erich and Greg Gagne all compete at this event. Nepotism Clash 3. Yeah, sorry, that wasn't good. The two trade clotheslines at the opening bell. Jeff then misses a running crossbody and he spends a fair portion of the bout sitting on the outside selling his arm. Mr. Flamboyant here then focuses on the injured body part, but soon enough Jeff comes back with a missile dropkick. Double J continues selling the arm and shoulder though. A few pin attempts follow, but Eric counters a sunset flip to get the win. Only 4 minutes of action here, but what we got was fine. Eric says the belt's back where it belongs during a post-match interview. He then babyfaces the crowd by saying he's going to get a doctor to check on Jeff Jarrett, and Super Clash continues on. So far, it's not terrible guys, I've seen way worse. Eric's career ended when he was involved in a road accident in October 1992. His car was hit by a big rig truck and he suffered a badly bruised liver along with severe ligament and cartilage damage in his knee. He took this accident as a sign to get out of the wrestling business. We have another interview with one of the POWW ladies, and her name is, it's the terrorist. The Syrian terrorist, to be precise, though she was born in Las Vegas. Fans of Glow may remember her as Palestina. What a name. Jimmy Valiant took on Wayne Bloom in the next matchup. Bloom would team up with Mike Enos in the future to form the Beverly Brothers, while Jimmy Valiant made his debut way back in 1964, and he'd have quite a storied career, leading up to him having his last recorded match in 2023. Yeah, our boy was working until he was 80 years old. It's a shame this match is absolute dog shit and it only goes for around 20 seconds. A back elbow and an elbow drop from the Boogie Woogie Man scores Valiant the win. Easy payday for sure, but let's hope he gets his check in the mail, because according to Jerry Lawler, no one ended up getting paid for this gig. Bambi is the next lady who gets interviewed backstage. Kinda crazy that this show's being built around this lingerie battle royal. Anyway, some of you may remember Bambi from her time in WCW, and she has absolutely nothing of interest to say here. Brickhouse Brown takes on Iceman King Parsons next. This one was for the World Class Texas Heavyweight Championship, and you gotta respect the Iceman for having such wonderful hair. Takes a real man to walk about like that. Brickhouse Brown has some dance moves, ladies and gents, and he doesn't do too badly at the match opening. King Parsons ends up on the outside a few times where we get to see more of that fabulous hair. But when the match resumes, the Iceman takes control with a high knee followed by a nice snap suplex. One thing I will say about this show is the sound of the mat is very satisfying. There's a loud thump anytime someone hits the canvas. In general though, the overall presentation is very boring, and it seems the only thing Vern Gagne spent money on was a new ring apron. A big right hand makes the Iceman beg for mercy. Brickhouse follows up with a running forearm. There's absolutely no crowd reaction at all for this match, unfortunately, but it comes to an end when Brickhouse covers Parsons, but our pigtail friend gets his foot on the bottom rope. Brickhouse thinks he's won it, even though the referee's hand didn't slap the mat for a third time, and so Iceman produces those brass knucks that don't look like brass knucks, but we'll call them brass knucks anyway. One punch later, Iceman King Parsons wins this pretty crappy match. Iceman explains that he was once Brickhouse's teacher, but he didn't teach him everything. It would have been really nice to know all this before the match took place. Still, two guys here who did have pretty storied careers. Parsons was a mainstay on world-class television, and he'd eventually move over to Herb Abrams' UWF. And Brickhouse would stay put when World Class and the CWA merged to create the USWA, having matches against Flex Kavana in the USWA promotion, and also wrestling a WWF dark match against Hunter Hearst Helmsley in 1995. The next ladies interviewed for the upcoming Battle Royal are Brandy May and Pocahontas. Yes, Pocahontas. Old Poca says she's gonna war dance all over the ring tonight, while Brandy May says she's gonna lose no clothes when the POWW women collide inside the squared circle. Bad Company, consisting of Paul Diamond and Pat Tanaka, are going to team up with Medusa Maselli to take on the Top Guns and Wendy Richter. This is a mixed tag match for the AWA Women's and AWA Tag Team titles, so winner takes all. This isn't the usual Top Guns lineup, by the way. John Paul's injured, so Derek Dukes is taking his place. Bad Company and Medusa are being managed by Diamond Dallas Page, and DDP gets some cheap heat before introducing these representatives of his Diamond Exchange. The match gets underway with what was supposed to be all three heels getting thrown into each other. Medusa and Wendy didn't get the memo though, and so it takes them ages before they remember to do the spot. The majority of the bout centers around Derek Dukes needing to tag out, but he keeps getting cut off by Bad Company. And then the women get a chance to do a bit of work, the highlight of which was this powerbomb from Wendy Richter. The end of the match was a total disaster though. Wendy's supposed to duck out of the way when Tanaka tries to kick her, but instead she just takes the kick. You can hear DDP shouting to do it again, which Pat does right away, and this time Wendy does remember to go down. Derek's then supposed to dropkick Tanaka, but he misses by a mile, and Wendy ends up pinning Medusa for the win. Dreadful, just dreadful. After the bout, Medusa gets assaulted by the babyfaces. The crowd love it, but it of course wouldn't fly today. And Medusa then smacks Pat Tanaka on the outside for messing up, resulting in DDP throwing her out of their little group. The first two matches of this show were at least passable, but we've taken an incredible nosedive here, and we aren't even halfway through the event yet. Kerry Von Erich gets interviewed backstage. He has his little girl Holly with him, and Kerry says he's here to show everyone that there's only one world champion. There's only one Mona Lisa, there's only one Eiffel Tower, there can only be one champion. But he knows full well that there's also an NWA championship and a WWF championship, but let's not worry about such trivial things. Greg Gagne wrestles Ron Garvin next. Ron was just getting ready to head off to the WWF right here, and he gave up the AWA International TV Championship before this event. But Ronnie was brought back for this match, and the vacant title is on the line. Because Ronnie was heading to New York, he decided he wasn't going to come back and do a clean job for Vern's son. So it ended with Garvin getting counted out, and Greg became the new champion. One spot sticks out in this match really badly, and that was a crossbody from Greg that was supposed to send both men out to the floor. Greg couldn't get any momentum, and it ends up being a hilariously bad piece of work that sticks out like a sore thumb. There's some post-match brawling that's also pretty bad. I mean, who gets in the ring to lock in a sleeper after the match is already ended? It's not just Garvin who applies a sleeper, Greg does it too. Man, I don't know. Greg also gets cheap hate by comparing his victory to the Minnesota Vikings beating the Chicago Bears, all because the crowd preferred Garvin over Greg. Also, it's kinda hard to believe that Greg's 41 years old here. He looks ancient. Backstage, Jerry Lawler says he knows about Kerry Von Erich's bad ankle after his motorbike accident, and he planned on going after the injured body part in this match. Mate, it's a bit more serious than an injured ankle, but okay. Lawler heard that Kerry's been protecting that ankle very well, and it's probably not the best route to take in order to beat the modern day warrior in the ring tonight, but the King does have a strategy that he's currently keeping close to his chest. It's been built up all night and it's finally arrived. The POW Lingerie Battle Royal, and my god, it's terrible. Absolutely terrible. You can eliminate someone by throwing them over the top rope or ripping their clothes off. And we've got Nina, Peggy Lee Leather, Luna Vachon, Brandy May, The Terrorist, Lori Lynn, Pocahontas and Malibu competing in the ring. David McLean calls the action. He's doing his best to get his talent over, but nothing could save this match from being a complete dumpster fire. In the end, The Terrorist won after eliminating Brandy May. I like how Brandy held on for dear life only to get unceremoniously kicked off the apron. After the match, The Terrorist rubs it in by saying America sucks or something, I don't know. And backstage, Peggy Lee and Luna Vachon get interviewed. Something tells me that David McLean only agreed to have the POWW women on this show if they could all get promo time either before or after the bout. It is a bit excessive, isn't it? Bill Apter then comes out to award Jerry Lawler with the PWI Inspirational Wrestler of the Year award, but the King doesn't come out to accept his plaque. I'm guessing he was too busy backstage getting prepared for his match, or he had no idea he was supposed to come out and get his award. But whatever the case, poor Bill Apter looks legitimately sad that there's going to be no award presentation held inside the arena. What a clusterfuck of a show. Next up, it's a boot camp match. Colonel De Beers versus Sergeant Slaughter. You call him Colonel De Beers because he loves drinking beers. Sarge, representing G.I. Joe and the good old US of A, says he's fighting for America tonight and everything it stands for. The Colonel is fighting for South Africa and beers. Seriously though, the De Beers name comes from the De Beers Group Mining and Trading Company that was based in South Africa, and the De Beers gimmick is one that could never fly in today's social climate. The Colonel's also part of the Diamond Exchange, so DDP's here to do the introductions. De Beers takes a beating with Sarge's riding crop for the first portion of the match, though he's able to take it away when Slaughter gets choked out. Sarge takes a few shots in the ring before the action spills to the outside. In here, De Beers uses one of the rope holds that's used to keep the audience away from the ring. There's an unintentionally hilarious spot where the Colonel uses Sarge's helmet for a headbutt. It just looks so dumb. But Slaughter fights back when De Beers accidentally hits DDP off the ring apron. We see the Cobra Clutch and Sergeant Slaughter wins the match. Afterwards, Sheik Adnan El Kassi runs in to attack Sergeant Slaughter. Sarge fights back, but he has no chance at all when the Iron Sheik makes a surprise appearance. Sarge gets beaten up pretty badly by these evil foreigners, but then good guy foreigners Los Guerreros show up to help Slaughter out. After the match, Slaughter says he's going to declare war on these jabronis. I reckon Iran may be friends tonight, but these bozos will be 6 feet under when Sarge gets through with them. Backstage, Bill Apter is able to give Jerry Lawler his PWI award, but you can tell they weren't ready to record this at all due to the camera overexposure that makes your eyes bleed. At least Bill looks happy though, and that's all that matters. Well, we've had a string of terrible matches, but thankfully the next one isn't too bad. The Samoan SWAT team, consisting of Samu and Fatu, wearing Jagger shirts, taking on Michael Hayes and Steve Cox. The SWAT team are managed by former Fabulous Freebird Buddy Roberts, and Michael Hayes wanted to get his hands on Buddy ever since he left the Freebirds. So there's a good bit of story here, and the match itself goes off without a hitch. Nothing to really point out that was bad or anything. That's the thing with this show though, you're just accepting average matches as good at this point because everything else has either been terrible or just terribly bland. What Super Clash 3 is really missing is the flashy production of the WWF and all the pizzazz that surrounds a WWF pay-per-view. It's also missing real quality matches that one could find in the main NWA promotions, and you can instantly tell why the AWA, CWA and World Class were much further behind in regards to their national and global footprint. Everything looks cheap and even a little unappealing. That's not to say you need to have high production values to put on good wrestling shows, but you don't want to look like dog shit either, you know what I mean? Michael Hayes couldn't get his hands on the honorary use on this night. As a matter of fact, it was due to Roberts that Hayes lost the match via pinfall. Michael sails for a very long time after the bell rings as he lays on the mat for what seems like an eternity. And after the bout, Iron Sheik and Adnan talk a lot of old bollocks, don't even care. Though what is noteworthy is that on the network version of Super Clash, this interview gets abruptly cut off when the Iron Sheik begins talking about Allah. Things must have got a little spicy. Before Kerry Von Erich and Jerry Lawler lock it up, we've got an Indian strap match. This one is not of the Yapapai variety, unfortunately, but it does include Manny Fernandez and Wahoo McDaniel. IWGP champion Tatsumi Fujinami's here, and Fernandez gets in his face wanting a title shot. He calls him a racial slur here, which I won't repeat in this video. So Fujinami helps Wahoo get a free shot on his opponent and the match is on. Fernandez totally deserved it. Out of curiosity, I looked up how many strap matches Wahoo McDaniel's competed in, and I kid you not, 123 strap matches have been recorded for Wahoo McDaniel. That is insane, and there's probably even more that haven't been recorded. Stagger Lee Marshall says Wahoo has never lost a strap match, which is just completely not true. But he does win this one, and it's quite a slow bout. Slow, but still pretty violent. Both guys got busted open pretty badly as they both whip each other and punch each other with a strap wrapped around their fists. Though in the end, Fernandez kicks Wahoo into the final turnbuckle and McDaniel wins the match. The two continue fighting after the bell. The referee gets tossed out of the ring. Fujinami returns to the ring to save Wahoo, and after the bell, the winner gets interviewed by Lee Marshall. Wahoo says this strap match didn't settle anything because he wants Fernandez dead. And that's just really fucking nice, isn't it? It's time for Kerry Von Erich versus Jerry Lawler. Vern Gagne, an AWA president and all-around goof, Stanley Blackburn give their predictions. Vern says he can't choose a winner, and Stanley says it's a flip of a coin. So thanks for the deep insight, guys. Fucking invaluable information right here. Vern also said the world is watching right now and everyone wants to see who's going to win this next match. A lie if I've ever heard one. Jerry Lawler's in the ring. He promises that there will be only one world champion after this match, and the King also understands that Kerry Von Erich has a lot of fans here tonight. Lawler was a babyface around this time, but he knew all too well that the fans would cheer for the modern day warrior, and cheer they did. Kerry comes out to a great ovation as he holds a yellow rose in memory of his brother David. Strangely, Kerry keeps looking at his bicep before the ring introductions, and that's because he managed to somehow cut it open before this match took place. Jerry Lawler said Kerry was messed up backstage and this cut wasn't planned nor part of the match, and so Jerry would have to work the cut into the match somehow. After the two shove each other around a bit, Jerry whacks Kerry's arm off the top turnbuckle and you can see the cut right here. Kerry would continue looking at his arm and checking on his arm, but it takes a little longer for the King to go back to the injured body part. The fight is now on. Lawler gets frustrated after taking two clotheslines from Kerry. Jerry then dodges a third, but he also misses a clothesline of his own, allowing Kerry to strike him again. Kerry then invites Jerry in for a test of strength. The King gets brought down to the mat. When the two stand, Jerry's able to trip Von Erich up, though he misses a fist drop. Kerry follows up with a tornado punch that looked pretty damn great, but the King kicks out of the follow-up cover. Jerry then bites down on Kerry's bicep, giving the King a chance to go on offense before sending Kerry over the top rope with a punch. Kerry takes his time getting back in the ring, but he's able to floor Jerry again with another tornado punch from the apron, though King gets his knees up when Kerry tries getting back inside the ropes. Jerry then performs his signature piledriver. He thinks he's got it won, but Von Erich no-sells it. When King turns around, he takes yet another tornado punch and Kerry wants to end it with an iron claw. The King stops Kerry from locking in the famous Von Erich finishing move, and then the referee takes a bump when Kerry kicks out of a cover. There's no official as Kerry pulls off a piledriver of his own. Von Erich has the match won, but the ref's knocked out just like all his front teeth. When the ref wakes up, Jerry's able to kick out, and then the bloodbath begins. The two head outside. Kerry punches the ring post by accident, and this puts him at a disadvantage. The King then puts on those brass knucks that don't look like brass knucks, but we'll call them brass knucks anyway, and Kerry gets clobbered. This gets followed up with a second rope fist drop from Jerry Lawler, and Kerry's been busted open badly. A second fist drop gets countered with a claw around King's midsection, but Jerry won't give up. And so Kerry locks the claw around King's head, but the blood loss here is getting pretty insane. Jerry gets a foot on the ropes and the referee checks on Von Erich. The official allows the match to continue on, so another claw gets locked in. Jerry won't give up and the official becomes increasingly concerned about Kerry's state right now. But Von Erich brings Jerry to his feet and the King's able to fight back. Jerry uses an object from his tights and swear to God, every time Jerry does this you just know he's not actually holding anything. Whatever the case, Kerry goes down and Jerry gets in another shot as Von Erich's now in a lot of trouble. A few more punches on the mat gets followed up with more punches when both men are standing up again. But the King remains in control when Kerry misses a tornado punch. Another shot with that invisible illegal object follows and Kerry falls out of the ring. The match resumes inside the ropes and this time Kerry's able to fight back. Lawler takes a ton of punishment in the corner and when both men stand in the middle of the ring, they immediately go down when they punch each other in the jaw. The referee continues to show concern towards Kerry, and that concern leads to the match ending when Von Erich applies the claw one more time. The move gets locked in, but the official stops the match due to excessive blood loss. He won't let Kerry continue, and that means Jerry Lawler becomes both the AWA champion and the WCCW champion. Kerry can't believe what happened. He lifts both belts in the air before leaving the ring, but the referee raises Jerry's hand in victory and the King cuts a promo after the bout. He says he respects Von Erich, but the referee did the right thing. Jerry would have blinded Kerry if the match continued on, so it was the right call from the official. Kerry, meanwhile, doesn't share these sentiments backstage. Kerry says he's never heard of a match in the state of Texas where the referee stops the action due to blood loss, but Kerry, mate, you're not in Texas right now, are you? Stanley Blackburn says he made this new provision. He told officials to stop matches if there's ever too much blood loss. And yes, Stan, it would have been great if you actually announced this before the card. Apparently, Kerry went into this show fully expecting to beat Lawler, but it's a funny old political game, this wrestling business, especially when you've got multiple promoters trying to get their talent over. Still, Von Erich didn't look like a loser when all was said and done, so I'm sure Daddy Fritz wasn't too angry. The crowd did not like the outcome though. They chanted bullshit when Jerry got announced as the match winner. Insane as Jerry didn't get paid for working Super Clash 3 as promised, he ended up keeping the belt and he didn't work for the company ever again. Verne Gagne had to get another championship belt made and Lawler kept the original at home. Easily the best match on this card though. One good match doesn't make a great show by any means, but even Lawler said it was one of the best and most memorable matches of his whole career. Because they didn't want to end the show on a downer, Super Clash ends with the Rock and Roll Express taking on the Stud Stable. You'd like to think then that the Rock and Roll would get a clean victory to send the crowd home happy, but no, it's a fucking double disqualification, meaning the show actually does end on a downer. Tons of people have already left the show. Ricky, Robert, Jimmy Golden and Robert Fuller brawled outside the ring during the closing moments of the match and the referee just said, fuck it, you guys should go home too. So fans left the arena feeling a bit bewildered when this one was said and done. Fans are already leaving the arena during the Rock and Roll's post-match interview and no one cared about what the Stud Stable had to say backstage. And by the time Verne Gagne pats himself on the back at ringside, the arena's almost empty. As mentioned earlier, it's been said that no one got paid for this show. At least that's what Jerry Lawler said. Jerry Jarrett and the Von Erichs felt ripped off by Verne and it didn't take long for World Class and the CWA to merge, creating the USWA promotion while Verne's AWA continued on while on life support. Vince McMahon said he knew these promoters couldn't get a cup of coffee together, never mind work together, in order to compete against the WWF, so McMahon was not worried at all about this Super Clash card. The show was an utter failure. Lawler vs Von Erich wasn't enough to make people turn away from the WWF and the NWA. And after this event, the AWA wouldn't be seen again on pay-per-view. Was it as bad as everyone makes it out to be? Yeah, kind of. I mean, I'm currently watching WCW pay-per-views right now that are much worse than Super Clash 3, but that's just comparing bad stuff to really bad stuff. Lawler vs Von Erich is worth a watch. The opener is also kinda cool, if not way too short. Nothing else on this card stands out as it all ranges from painfully mediocre to downright terrible, but it is still a fascinating attempt by a bunch of failing promotions trying one last time to keep themselves afloat. Thank you for watching everyone, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please take care. After covering the AWA Super Clash 3 show, I fell into a rabbit hole while researching the Dan days of the AWA promotion, and that's when I decided to watch the infamous pilot episode of the AWA's Team Challenge series. For the uninitiated and for those who have absolutely no idea what this is about or why it's so infamous, I'll give you a quick rundown. The Team Challenge series was another desperate attempt by the AWA to get people interested in their product again. An attempt by Verne Gagne to update his wrestling organisation after he'd been so defiantly old school while other promotions were evolving the entire business. The AWA was a shell of its former self in late 1989 and in early 1990. Big stars who graced an AWA ring were now making a living working for the WWF or the NWA. So there was of course no Hulk Hogan, no Kurt Hennig, no Stan Henson, no Ricky Steamboat. Bockwinkel was more or less retired. The list goes on and on. They even lost Mean Gene Okerlund, for crying out loud. The company were doing everything they could to survive, such as the aforementioned Super Clash 3 show a year prior, but it was kinda sad how far behind the times the AWA truly were during this era. One of the things I pointed out while watching Super Clash 3 was the lack of pizzazz and the lack of overall decent production values. I also mentioned that you don't necessarily need high production values to put on a good wrestling show, but the AWA was so far behind the WWF that their shows came across as incredibly cheap looking and incredibly dull looking in comparison to the competition. The WWF was all about the glitz and glamour, the bright lights, the entrances, the music, the distinctive production that quickly became the norm when it comes to wrestling presentation. And with the AWA looking so stale and dated, the company decided to do something quite drastic, a sort of reset of the company that would begin with the AWA Team Challenge series. Originally, the idea was to have the Team Challenge series be its very own weekly television show on syndicated TV. Reportedly, this was the idea of Vern's son Greg. The company recorded a pilot episode to shop around potential networks where the host would consistently say this is a new AWA, and that pilot episode was locked up and put in the vault after the AWA failed to get their show put on TV. It's quite interesting too, because not only would the AWA finally update their presentation for this new weekly show, but they would eventually throw away tradition by giving fans a ton of gimmick matches. It's not that the AWA didn't hold gimmick matches in the past, but Vern Gagne wasn't really a promoter who liked change all that much, and the matches that would get presented in the AWA, even this late in the game, were somewhat more traditional, you could say. Vern held on to the AWA's glory years, thinking that this was always the right way to do business, but he had to do something drastic in order to keep his company afloat. And the Team Challenge Series TV show was his son's answer to all of the AWA's problems. All wrestlers on the AWA roster were divided into 3 teams. Larry Zbyszko headed Larry's Legends, Baron's Blitzers were headed by Baron Von Raschke, and Sarge's Snipers were originally headed by Sergeant Slaughter, though Sarge ended up leaving the AWA in the middle of this mess, and he got replaced by Colonel De Beers and the De Beers Diamond Cutters. Heels and babyfaces would have to work together during the AWA Team Challenge series. Winners of Team Challenge matches would earn points for their team, and the highest scoring team would earn $1 million, though it was never made clear exactly when the Team Challenge series would end. So, in today's video, we're going to look at the AWA Team Challenge Series pilot TV show, a show that was once completely unavailable to the public. It's just interesting to see what the AWA thought wrestling fans wanted in a pro wrestling show, and it's funny looking at this entire mess that was supposed to be all updated and all new. It's like your grandparents trying to get into gangster rap or something, or the how do you do fellow kids meme. It kind of reminds me of that. Here's how the show opens up. A bunch of women in swimsuits saying yay, yay, yay for the AWA. Completely out of tune with the music playing in the background. We see a rock band performing on stage for a quick second or two. And look, we also see pro wrestling. Imagine that. We see women boxing for some reason, and yes, we will be treated to women's boxing on this wrestling show a bit later on. And there was also supposed to be rock music or music videos playing during this pilot, but I guess they have been removed from the WWE network due to licensing. After this high energy and youthful intro, we then cut to Vern Gagne and his fucking dog, and Vern's here to tell us all about the AWA Team Challenge series. He says the Team Challenge winners will be determined by a point system, the first time such a thing's been done in the world of pro wrestling. And he also says new television technology is going to bring fans closer to the action than ever before. A lot of promises are being made here. We then go to what's described as the AWA satellite base. Inside the satellite base, we've got Greg Gagne, because of course he'd be here. And we've also got Ralph Stranges. Ralph would become a prominent hockey play-by-play commentator, while Greg would, he just remain Greg Gagne. Ralph says we're going to see the world's best wrestlers, the Beverly Hills Knockouts, who were a female foxy boxing troupe for horny old men. And Greg says in all his years in wrestling, he's never seen anything like this Team Challenge series. We're going to see pro wrestling like we have never seen it before. And here it is, guys. Our first match features Tommy Jammer, and look at his entrance. Basically, this new cutting-edge technology promised by the AWA is nothing more than a green screen. It's so bad that it becomes unintentionally hilarious. The crowd, if you can even call it a crowd, consists of video footage of random people in a bar or something being played at high speed. And for some reason, we keep cutting over to a restaurant during the matches where people are seen clapping and cheering. There's no live audience around the ring. There isn't even a seat for a paying fan to sit in. There's a ring, a referee, the competitors, and a cameraman. That's it. Oh, we've also got piped in crowd noise. Basically, what we've got here is the pioneer of pandemic wrestling. The camera cuts back to the restaurant at random times, and it's really quite jarring. Ralph tells Greg to punch the button anytime he wants to see a replay. And Ralph also says these slow motion replays are a first in pro wrestling. Slow motion has never been utilized before in a pro wrestling show, apparently. Greg and Ralph keep banging on about this new technology and how it's changing pro wrestling, but let's just sum it up. It's green screen entrances, it's studio wrestling without a crowd, we've got slow motion replays and hilarious camera cuts to folks sitting in a bar or restaurant getting free beer in exchange for cheering at absolutely nothing. I'm not kidding either. One of the production guys said these fans got free booze from the AWA at a TGI Fridays or an Applebee's restaurant. Now, the camera angles used in the ring aren't bad. In that respect, it is something different, I guess. But you can't lose yourself in this match at all because everything else is just so bad. The match itself isn't even all that good. Tommy Jammer beats Tom Burton with a power slam and a splash. And imagine being a TV executive watching this for the first time. Imagine someone trying to sell you this as something you could put on your television network. It should be noted too that Ralph and Vern make a conscious effort here to present this as something totally fresh and totally different. They mention that this is a new AWA countless times, but I'm not sure if I like this new AWA. Team captains Baron Von Raschke and Sergeant Slaughter may be friends, but the Baron says they now have a friendly rivalry. Paul Diamond, representing Baron's Blitzers, is going to face Colonel De Beers of Sarge's Snipers a bit later on. The Sarge and De Beers have a rough relationship, but Sarge is putting him in this upcoming match because he knows how much of a bad bastard he really is. Back at the satellite base, Ralph and Greg tell us we're about to hear from the Destruction crew, Mike Enos and Wayne Bloom, and they're causing destruction by gently tapping the green screen in order to make some buildings fall down. What the fuck is going on? These lads are managed by luscious Johnny Valiant, and our boys also get a green screen entrance. Their opponents, Jerry Lynn and Ricky Rice, do not get afforded such luxuries. And honestly, I think if I were given the choice of a green screen entrance or just appearing in the ring, I think I'd choose to just appear in the ring. By the way, if you look closely at the videos playing at the entranceway, you'll notice it's the same crowd filmed from different perspectives. The incredibly low effort put into all this has to be praised if I'm honest. Absolute chancers. The match here is once again nothing to get excited about, but it is interesting seeing Jerry Lynn compete in this absolute train wreck. Mike Enos and Wayne Bloom are pretty used to train wrecks, so nothing out of the ordinary here. And as for Ricky Rice, not a lot to say really. We saw Ricky perform at Super Clash 3 and he'd end up becoming a job guy for the WWF, only making a few appearances on syndicated programs, though he did wrestle guys like Ricky Steamboat, Ted DiBiase and Bret Hart. More slow motion replays are preceded by Ralph saying punch the button. It's already getting really annoying. More footage of folks eating and cheering at TGI Fridays gets played. The Destruction crew win with a Doomsday device, and I'm sorry, I just can't accept this as a wrestling show. It's just so utterly bizarre that you just can't take it seriously. Imagine thinking this was going to be what saves your promotion. Imagine thinking this was going to compete with the WWF, who had just aired WrestleMania 5 earlier in the year. And I know there's going to be a lot of old school AWA fans out there taking offense to this, but let me tell you something, brothers. This is just downright shit. After the match, Eric Bischoff gets in the ring for a post-match interview, and yes, that is a dead animal stuck on his head. Valiant says a whole lot of nothing, but he does mention the Doomsday device being outlawed in Hong Kong. Absolute random gibberish. The audio feed from Eric's microphone was also messed up. Just a total mess. Back at the AWA Super High-Tech Satellite Base, young Ralph says the Beverly Hills Knockouts are coming up next. But before then, Sergeant Slaughter lets us know, once again, that Colonel De Beers is going to face Paul Diamond later on. It's going to be an over-the-top rope King of the Hill match, and even though the Sarge thinks De Beers is a miserable, low-down, dirty maggot, he knows De Beers will beat Diamond and secure some points for Sarge's snipers. We also hear from De Beers, who's supposed to stand in front of the old South Africa flag, but the colours got messed up and instead he stands in front of a cropped, non-binary flag. He's very progressive. De Beers talks about never losing a war. He says he's going to win his match, not for Slaughter, not for America, but for the pride of South Africa and for delicious beers. Ralph and Greg point out the painfully obvious when they talk about team members not liking each other in this team challenge. But then Ralph gets all excited when he says it's time for the Beverly Hills Knockouts. He says nothing like this has been seen before in a wrestling show. We gotta see it with our own eyes because we won't believe it. And here it is. Slaughterhouse Shawn versus the Blonde Bomber, a worked boxing match from the Beverly Hills Knockouts, and honestly, I didn't have a clue who these women were, and I didn't learn the term foxy boxing until researching for this video. I know, I'm an innocent little flower. Not a terrible lot out there in regards to the background of the Beverly Hills Knockouts or how they came to be, but basically it's just a bunch of girls who perform these kind of work matches in strip clubs. They also had more risque performances, of course, and VHS tapes were even released featured the women doing their thing. And look, I won't judge you. If this is your thing, then have at it, you absolute horn dog, but think about this. Is this really what the AWA thought would bring them back to the promised land? Wasn't one of the main reasons why the WWF was so successful during this era was because of their family-friendly entertainment? Didn't the WWF make a ton of money from all those licensing deals they got for toys, action figures and whatnot? You could say Verne was just going for a totally different demographic, which is fair enough, but skewing towards the Dirty Dog demo while pro wrestling's flourishing thanks to other companies aiming their shows at kids, it doesn't sound like the best business decision, does it? I get it too. Eric Bischoff went for an older demographic when he began the Nitro TV show, but there is a big difference here, as in there's an older audience who enjoy foxy boxing and there's an older audience who enjoy pro wrestling. For those who care, Slaughterhouse Shawn wins the match, and I'm sure no one cares. This thing was filmed in an empty strip club and they could have had an audience here, but instead they still cut to the restaurant to show people cheering. These people had no idea what they were cheering for, of course, so old Andy here probably got in a lot of trouble when his wife watched this pilot on the WWE network. The match features first-person camera angles, which may have been innovative, but it's also totally stupid. You've got a referee telling the girls not to pull each other's hair, even though they're wearing fucking boxing gloves. There's a ridiculous amount of camera cuts during the match, though folks who watched WWE over the past 10 years or so will be fully accustomed to this headache-inducing presentation style. And I don't know why I'm even mentioning this, because the action itself is pretty awful. Big whiffed punches that cause knockdowns, wrestling moves breaking out in the middle of the fight, that kind of stuff. The commentators get very confused as the fight continues on, but they still enjoy what they see for obvious reasons. Greg Gagne explains what the team challenge is all about, as if we don't already know. We see the current standings, and I've got absolutely no idea how these points were distributed or awarded, but Larry's Legends are currently in the lead. Next, we've got the Paul Diamond versus Colonel De Beers over the top rope King of the Hill match. And for some reason that I can't really explain, Paul Diamond cuts a pre-match promo from outer space, complete with spooky sci-fi noises, like UFOs flying around trying to work out why this giant man's talking about wrestling while floating around in space. Kinda funny too when you consider Diamond would later become Max Moon in the WWF after Conan walked out of the company. Diamond also says here that this is the first ever team challenge match, so please explain to me how the fuck 44 points in total have already been handed out on the leaderboard. Remember when Verne and his stupid dog said this point system's never been done in wrestling before? Yeah, it doesn't really matter all that much, does it? Paul Hard Rock Diamond makes his way down the weird green screen vortex or whatever it's supposed to be. And if you look closely, you can see the guy in the yellow shirt fall off his seat. He's either really excited to see Paul Diamond or he's really drunk. As a matter of fact, this guy falls off his seat during every entrance, seeing as the AWA just reused the same video footage over and over again for these entrances. This match goes on for about 5 minutes, but it feels like an absolute eternity. Nothing to say that I haven't already said before, but the Beers did take the time to jaw-jack the imaginary audience sitting around ringside, and the production team made sure to cut over to this lady looking incredibly shocked at the Colonel's harsh words. It ends when De Beers goes for a piledriver. Bad ring awareness right here, folks. Diamond dumps the Colonel over the top rope, and that means Baron's Bastards get 10 million points on the leaderboard. Well done, Paul. At this point, the boys in the Area 51 satellite control base have absolutely nothing else of interest to show us. They have used up all their green screen promos and footage of half-naked women pretending to punch each other in a strip club, so it's back to the studio for the final match of the show, even though Colonel De Beers vs Paul Diamond was billed as our main event. We've got Sergeant Slaughter taking on the Terminator, and no, it's not Arnold Schwarzenegger. I don't even think Arnie could have saved this train wreck. But I think this is Marcus Laurinaitis, brother of Road Warrior Animal and some other perverted deviant who was once involved in the wrestling business. Slaughter wins with a Cobra Clutch. Again, it felt like the match went on for way too long. And after the bell, Eric Bischoff asks Sarge how he's feeling, and a sweaty, blown up Slaughter says he's in the best shape of his life. Back at the super secret Battlestar Spaceship 2000, Greg says it's going to take him a week to recover from all this action, and yeah, I fully agree. And Ralph promises more rock and roll, more Beverly Hills knockouts, and more of the best wrestling action on the planet in next week's episode. There would never be another episode because the show didn't get picked up, and the team challenge would play out on regular AWA shows as mentioned earlier on. The production guy who talked about recording fans inside the restaurant is named Joe Chupik. He appeared on the 605 Super podcast where he spoke about the creation of this whole thing. And I highly recommend checking the podcast out if you want to learn more about what went into putting this show together. Joe also had his own YouTube channel where he uploaded AWA videos, but it's been dormant for some time now. It was Joe who shared the information about how this pilot came about and how it was all apparently Greg Gagne's idea. But Joe also said that when Daddy Vern watched this pilot episode, he wasn't happy at all. He didn't like the use of slow motion because he thought it exposed the business. He would constantly say, "Oh geez," while slapping his forehead as the show continued on. Vern just didn't like it because he was so stubbornly set in his old school ways. That, and also because, well, the show sucked. Let's not beat around the bush here. Eric Bischoff said in his 83 Weeks podcast that a producer named Mike Shields was working with an ESPN syndicator named Bob Sires, and it was Bob who wanted to utilise chroma keying in order to camouflage the fact that the AWA couldn't put people inside arenas anymore. The original idea was to use the green screen to put fans around the ring, and you can just imagine how bad that would have looked. It's a really terrible idea. Chroma keying an entire wrestling audience nowadays would be extremely hard work, and these mad bastards were considering it back in the late 80s. The producers realised that this wasn't feasible, thankfully, but the green screen was still utilised for entrances, and you saw the results. It was just comically bad. Give the AWA their dues though. They did say this would be a wrestling show like no other, and they did say they were going to present pro wrestling in a way that had never been done before. This is something they did indeed accomplish with this Team Challenge Series pilot. It may have been bad, it definitely didn't work, but it was still different. So different that it actually became ridiculous. The AWA tried something different because they had no choice but to try something different, so you gotta give them at least a little credit for the effort that was put forth. In the end though, it was another failure for the company, and maybe the Team Challenge pilot should have stayed under lock and key. It really was that bad. The Team Challenge Series concept continued on through regular AWA programming. Due to very little people having interest in showing up the AWA shows, some of the earlier Team Challenge matches were taped in a TV studio without a live audience, the famous Pink Studio matches. A lot of the bouts were gimmick matches, and some of these gimmick matches were nothing short of atrocious, such as the infamous Great American Turkey Hunt. And instead of being a saviour for the AWA, the Team Challenge Series has become a bit of a joke when folks talk about the history of pro wrestling. Instead of being innovative and new, it all turned into pure wrestlebolics that only exists today to give fans a laugh. In the end, the series wrapped up just before the AWA became inactive, and for those curious, Larry's Legends would win the whole thing. Thank you so much for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please take care. Not too long ago, I talked about the WrestleMania 20 main event and how it ended up way better than what I anticipated. Triple H, Chris Benoit and Shawn Michaels put on a remarkable performance that I wasn't hyped for going into the match, but by the time it was over, I thought it was one of the best Mania main events the WWE ever produced. Well, on the complete flip side, another match took place at WrestleMania 20 that I was actually very excited for, and I'm not ashamed to admit that either. Brock Lesnar versus Bill Goldberg sounded like an explosive battle between two monsters, and I imagined a match where these two would beat the hell out of each other with big power moves, stiff strikes, weapons, the whole 9 yards. I was anticipating King Kong versus Godzilla. I was expecting the ring to get torn apart, a bloodbath, a battle for the ages, and something we would remember for a long time. Well, we do remember the WrestleMania 20 encounter between Brock and Goldberg, but not for the reasons I just mentioned. The triple threat main event quickly changed my expectations in a matter of minutes, and so did the Brock versus Goldberg match. This wasn't King Kong versus Godzilla. It was incredibly painful to watch, if I'm honest. I bought into the hype. I admit they completely got me hook, line and sinker, and it's not like I was a massive fan of Brock or Goldberg around this time period, but it was the potential that this match had that drew me in. That potential was never met. The New York crowd ripped it apart, the guys in the ring didn't seem all that bothered, and the referee of the bout got cheered more than the competitors, which to be fair should have been expected. Today we're going to take a look at Brock Lesnar versus Bill Goldberg at WrestleMania 20. Apologies in advance. Let's get something out of the way before continuing on today. I don't have the same weird hatred for Bill Goldberg nor Brock Lesnar that many other people seem to have. Neither guy was my favourite wrestler back then, but I do appreciate what they brought to the table. Brock Lesnar was, and still is, a freak of nature. He's practically unstoppable. When Brock Lesnar performs, I can't keep my eyes off the TV because guys his size aren't supposed to move that way. The way he can throw people around the ring, the way he looks legitimately scary and intimidating, how he lays it in. I have a lot of fun watching Lesnar compete, and I know some people don't like how he's booked, and I know some people just don't like wrestlers staying at the top for long periods of time, especially heel wrestlers, but I'm just not bothered by Brock Lesnar's WWE runs as much as others. Sorry, but it's the truth. I also admire Brock's honesty about what he wants to get out of the WWE. Lesnar doesn't care much about pro wrestling and the history of pro wrestling. Brock Lesnar wants to make money, and he's said as much countless times, including on official WWE programming such as the Stone Cold podcast. Think about it though, it would be more annoying if Brock lied and said he loved wrestling while holding the belt and sitting at home. Don't get me wrong, I understand why people get annoyed with Lesnar, and I do understand how frustrating it is when a champion isn't around to defend his title, but I just don't mind it as much as others, especially in modern times. Bill Goldberg. Yeah, Goldberg seems to clock in every now and then these days to get the paycheck, or at least that's what it feels like sometimes. But it's a shame that much of the criticism Goldberg receives nowadays is from fans who only know him through his WWE runs. I'm not saying people didn't dislike Goldberg in WCW. There were fans who didn't like the streak, and there were fans smart enough to see WCW were booking themselves in a corner with Goldberg, but you'd be lying to yourself if you said Goldberg wasn't over in WCW during the Monday Night Wars. At one point, he was the most popular act in the whole company. He was one of the very few people who debuted during the NWO era and still managed to break out as a megastar. And that should be proof enough on how popular Goldberg became. Fans back then understood what they were getting with Goldberg. He'd walk out to the stage, he'd breathe smoke, he'd get in the ring, beat the shit out of his opponent, spear, jackhammer, and he's walking back up the ramp with the crowd absolutely losing their minds. This is what people wanted to see. It always got a great reaction, but when Goldberg does that stuff today, it doesn't work out so well because I think it isn't what people want to see anymore, and that's fair enough too. Times change and people expect more, and people also don't want to see the same guys come in and beat other guys who remain in the company for the rest of the year. That's absolutely understandable. When Goldberg first showed up in WWE in 2003, he wasn't put in matches where he would win in a matter of seconds. He had to have longer matches. Some were fine and some were not. I don't think Goldberg ever truly fit in when it came to the WWE, and I think his performances were definitely more suited to and complemented by the breakneck speed of WCW Nitro in the mid to late 90s. Brock Lesnar and Goldberg are respectively unique though, both through their careers and fan perception. Either you like them or you don't. In Madison Square Garden on March 14th, 2004, the fans made sure they let Goldberg and Lesnar know how they truly felt about them, and both men got one of the most hostile reactions in WrestleMania history because both men were getting ready to leave the company. Goldberg had signed a one-year deal with the WWE beginning on March 31st, 2003 and ending at WrestleMania 20. Why he was only signed for a year could be for a few different reasons. Maybe the WWE wanted to see how Goldberg would fit in. Maybe Goldberg didn't want to commit to anything more. Who knows? The stories online are, of course, stories of sensationalism, and it's actually funny how many stories there are and how many reasons we have for Goldberg's departure. Goldberg having problems with Triple H, Linda McMahon calling his run disappointing during a conference call, Goldberg not liking how he was no longer booked as a monster, Goldberg getting mad about a UK show booking, Goldberg not liking the edgier shows the WWE produced at the time, Goldberg not liking the comedy segments he was booked in, Goldberg failing to adjust to backstage politics. It's a never-ending list of unconfirmed reasons. He did, however, mention in interviews that politics backstage were a problem, so we know that much is true. And that could also make Triple H a guilty party, seeing as Bill feuded with Hunter for much of his WWE run. But all we need to know is that Goldberg got paid and he was due to leave after 1 year. There's no sense digging any further. Brock Lesnar debuted on WWE television in 2002, and his amateur credentials mixed with his freakish, imposing look made him an instant star, and he was booked as a monster right from the get-go. Brock went on a WWE crash course in the space of 2 years, flipping from heel to babyface and back to heel, winning the King of the Ring, winning the Undisputed Championship, winning the Royal Rumble, headlining WrestleMania, winning the WWE Championship. Brock was given a huge push during his first WWE run. In Brock's book, Death Clutch, he talks about why he left in 2004 and why he wanted to try his luck in the NFL. He was tired of the travel, he felt beaten down. He mentioned that he wasn't thrilled about dropping the WWE Championship to Eddie Guerrero the month before WrestleMania. Brock felt like he was being replaced here, even though he understood Vince was trying to capitalize on the Latino market. And like Goldberg, Brock wasn't one to play backstage politics, at least at that time. Brock was simply fed up with the WWE. He said he was so young at the time, yet he felt like he had the body of an old man. He wanted to remain competitive, so he decided to switch over to football and say goodbye to professional wrestling. You can see the similarities with Lesnar and Goldberg though in regards to how they felt about life as a WWE superstar during this era. Now, you may think this is all leading to me saying the fans should have been more understanding at WrestleMania 20, and the fans should really appreciate how honest Goldberg and Lesnar were in terms of their departures in 2004, but that still doesn't excuse the fact that their match at WrestleMania 20 was absolutely horrible. There's really no excuse for the match turning out the way it did. Goldberg and Brock first bumped into each other at Survivor Series 2003. Brock was the WWE champion, Goldberg was the world champion. Brock was cutting a promo about how he could beat anyone in the world, and Goldberg interrupted him. Goldberg introduced himself as the World Heavyweight Champion, and he wanted to know if Brock was going to wish him luck in his upcoming match against Triple H. Brock didn't answer. At the Royal Rumble pay-per-view in 2004, the two would meet again. Brock was still the WWE Champion, but Goldberg had dropped the World Belt the previous month at Armageddon. This time, Brock interrupted Goldberg after Lesnar had defeated Hardcore Holly. Brock said this interview should be with the WWE Champion, and Goldberg makes Lesnar panic a little when he says Hardcore Holly's standing right behind him. Lesnar felt a little embarrassed by what happened, so he decided to bide his time and wait until the Royal Rumble match to get some revenge. Goldberg entered the match at number 30. He was cleaning house and hitting spears left, right and centre. But then Brock came down and Goldberg takes an F5. With Goldberg distracted, Kurt Angle was able to dump him over the top rope. Lesnar laughed as he headed back up the entranceway. The night after the Royal Rumble, Goldberg looked in the camera and he said it doesn't matter which show he's on, Brock Lesnar is next. The week after that, Steve Austin, the sheriff of Monday Night Raw, paid Goldberg a visit in the locker room and Austin had a gift for Bill. Austin has a friend who gave him a ticket to the No Way Out pay-per-view. The SmackDown exclusive show would be headlined by Brock Lesnar defending the WWE Championship against Eddie Guerrero, and seeing as Austin can't go to the show, he thought Goldberg might want to sit front row and watch the WWE title match. Austin told Goldberg that he's representing the good name of Stone Cold if he decides to show up, and Austin told Goldberg not to do anything he wouldn't do. The relationship between Austin and Goldberg looked good, but then on the 9th of February episode of Raw, things got a little rocky. Paul Heyman showed up to Raw to warn Goldberg about what could happen if he interferes in Brock Lesnar's match, and Goldberg decides to spear Paul in the middle of the ring. Goldberg then tried to spear Mr. McMahon. Vince was trying to tell Goldberg not to go to the No Way Out pay-per-view, but Vince moves out of the way and Austin takes the full impact of the spear. Goldberg told Austin it was a mistake afterwards, and Austin says if Goldberg ever takes a Stone Cold Stunner, Goldberg better believe that it won't be a mistake. At the No Way Out pay-per-view, an empty seat was seen in the front row and the commentators weren't sure if Goldberg would show up. After the third match, Goldberg took his seat and immediately Paul Heyman came out to warn Goldberg not to jump over the barricade. Heyman said if Goldberg thinks about getting involved at any point in the night, then Bill would get arrested and removed from the arena by force. Brock Lesnar didn't want to hear it. Brock told Goldberg to get in the ring while Paul was screaming for Bill to stay away. Goldberg ends up getting inside the ropes, the crowd pops as both men get ready to fight, and they go at it. Goldberg counters an F5 attempt and Brock ends up taking a jackhammer. Again the crowd pops, but Paul isn't going to stand for it. Security gets called down and Goldberg's brought back up the rampway in handcuffs. We thought that was it all over, but later on during the Lesnar vs Guerrero match, Goldberg appeared again, spearing Lesnar towards the end of the bout and helping Eddie Guerrero win the WWE Championship. The end of No Way Out was great. Eddie's celebration is still awesome to look back at today, but now Goldberg has to stand by his actions and you just know Lesnar's going to come after him for what he did at the pay-per-view. On the next episode of SmackDown, Brock Lesnar cut a promo and he looked pretty down and pretty defeated. He said Eddie's just going to pawn off the WWE Championship belt, whereas the belt meant everything to the next big thing. And when Brock begins addressing Goldberg, his tone completely changes. Lesnar says Goldberg's going to feel the pain and Brock's going to break Goldberg in half. Brock asks Mr. McMahon for a shot at Goldberg at WrestleMania. Brock doesn't care what Austin thinks, what Heyman thinks, what Eric Bischoff thinks. Lesnar gets on his knees and he begs for a match against Goldberg. And yeah, he begs hard. So hard that it looks like he's taking a shit in the middle of the ring, but I digress. Over on Raw, Vince McMahon says he wasn't so sure if this match should happen. There isn't a referee who could maintain such a match. That's fucking laughable in hindsight, but Steve Austin comes out and Stone Cold suggests that he referees the match at WrestleMania. Vince wonders what's in it for Stone Cold, and Austin says it's none of McMahon's business. Maybe there was going to be some sort of storyline involving Austin if Goldberg or Lesnar stuck around after WrestleMania, who knows. But Vince makes the match official, and so we have another WrestleMania match booked for Madison Square Garden. Austin then refereed a Vince McMahon vs Eric Bischoff match to show he was up for the task at hand, but Brock Lesnar made a surprise appearance and Stone Cold got F5'd. On the following episode of SmackDown, Brock said he attacked Austin because Stone Cold gave Goldberg the ticket to No Way Out. Austin was just as responsible for Brock losing the title as Bill Goldberg. Brock Lesnar would steal Steve Austin's ATV. Sheriff Austin had drove his ATV to the ring for a few months and it became part of his overall character for a little while anyway, and Lesnar decided to steal the ATV and take it to SmackDown. It's a bit of an odd storyline development. We're just 2 weeks away from Mania and Goldberg isn't really involved anymore. It's all about Austin wanting to get his ATV back. Maybe at this point Bill had confirmed he wasn't going to sign a new contract and the WWE wanted to limit his screen time, I don't know. But Goldberg was not featured on the Raw before WrestleMania and that's unusual. Stone Cold promised to get his vehicle back on the SmackDown before Mania. Paul Heyman rallied the troops. Paul did not want Steve Austin at SmackDown and Paul wanted to show Austin that he wasn't welcome. Throughout the night, Heyman tried to make sure that Austin wouldn't get anywhere near the ring, and at the very end of the show, Brock challenged Austin to come to the ring and get his ATV while the SmackDown roster lined up at each side of the entranceway. Austin appears, he begins to walk down the ramp, and the SmackDown superstars allow him to pass. The Big Show's the last guy Austin has to walk past to get to Brock and his ATV, and the Big Show lets Steve walk on by before the SmackDown guys all head to the back. Stone Cold takes his ATV, he parks it on the ramp, he and Brock then have a fight on the entranceway and Brock gets busted open after getting his head rammed into the ring post. Paul Heyman takes a stunner in the ring and this gives Brock a chance to hit an F5 but Austin counters and Lesnar gets out of the ring before getting hit with a stunner. Brock walks past the ATV, the crowd cheers for Austin, and that's the final segment before WrestleMania later in the week. By the time WrestleMania had arrived, everyone in the arena knew that Goldberg hadn't signed a new contract, and they also found out that Brock was leaving the WWE after this match inside Madison Square Garden. The news had leaked out via the dirt sheets, and if there was ever a crowd who was going to give the guys in the ring a hard time, it would be the New York crowd. At the time, I wasn't too big into checking the news websites and all that shit, so when I watched WrestleMania 20 live, I had no idea that either man was gonna leave. So the crowd's reaction really took me by surprise and I had to get the news after the match. I also listened to what the commentators said and Jim Ross pretty much confirmed that Brock Lesnar was gone after this bout, but Ross didn't say anything about Goldberg. I also remember reading too that Goldberg was given the win on this night as a last ditch effort to get him to re-sign for another year, but I'm not sure if I believe that. If both men were leaving, then it really didn't matter who won the match, but I guess there was a higher chance of Goldberg coming back down the road, seeing as Lesnar was hell-bent on entering a completely new line of work. All three men get in the ring and the crowd's booing the competitors while cheering for the special referee. And even if both men weren't leaving, I'm sure the crowd still would have booed because the match was that bad. There's no other way to say it. They circle around the ring for what seems like an eternity, they stare at each other, they shout at each other, they take the time to stare down Steve Austin, and at one point the crowd chants for Austin. This makes Austin smile. It was an odd way to start the match, and yes, you may say they were building anticipation, but seeing as both guys were talking about ripping each other apart, and seeing as Vince McMahon added Austin as a referee because this match would be so unimaginably brutal and violent, then you can maybe see where I'm coming from here. The crowd then start chanting "You sold out" and they sing goodbye.
Stealing Austin's ATV.
When the two eventually lock up, they stay locked up for ages. Neither man gets an advantage, so they break it up, and the crowd boos again while chanting "boring." They lock up again, the exact same thing happens, only this time they stay locked up even longer. The crowd once again boos when they break the lockup, and yeah, not a good start at all. They lost the crowd before they even stepped in the ring, and they ensured they were never getting them back after the lockups. Madison Square Garden's now chanting "This match sucks." You'd think they'd call an audible and say "fuck it, let's beat the hell out of each other," but no. Brock gets thrown into the ropes from a side headlock, he tries a shoulder block and nobody moves a muscle. Goldberg tries the same and again there's no movement. The two men then go nose to nose as the boos become deafening, and they make it worse by running into each other before the two competitors crash to the mat. They then sit and look at each other across the ring, and it's at this moment where you're like, are these fuckers sabotaging the match? I mean, why do this when Madison Square Garden is giving you all the feedback you need? Something you may notice too is that Steve Austin is not wearing an earpiece. Usually a referee gets instructions from Gorilla to send to the guys inside the ring if something needs changed on the fly. I'm not saying that there wasn't someone else around the ring sending messages from the back, by the way, but it's something to take note of. Lesnar finally starts laying in the boots, and this makes the audience take a bit more notice. And then Goldberg performs his military press spinebuster. This makes the crowd cheer for just a moment, and maybe it should have started out like this. It gets a good reaction. Lesnar then dodges a spear attempt and Goldberg hits the ring post. On the outside, Goldberg gets his shoulder rammed into the opposite ring post, and there's a loud Goldberg sucks chant now inside the garden. Back inside the ring, Lesnar hits 2 suplexes, and he then decides to lock in a neck vice. This is just what this match needs, isn't it? A good old submission hold. The crowd chants Hogan at someone in the nosebleeds. Maybe it was a fan who dressed up for the occasion.
I find that somewhat offensive, but in any event.
A hip lock takeover gets Goldberg out of trouble, and then that mad bastard Lesnar locks in another neck vice. The crowd boos, and they boo even louder when it gets broken up and Lesnar hits a clothesline on Goldberg. Lesnar does some damage in the corner, but Goldberg comes back with a few clotheslines. The crowd are cheering, but again, they aren't cheering for what's happening in the ring. It's something going on in the stands. Goldberg hits his spinning neckbreaker, he lines Brock up, and we see the spear. Goldberg covers Brock, but Brock kicks out at 2. Goldberg argues with Austin that it was a 3 count, but this leads to Lesnar hitting the F5. Goldberg kicks out, Austin and Lesnar then have an argument, but it doesn't lead to anything. Goldberg then dodges a shoulder charge in the corner and he hits the second spear of the match. He then hits the jackhammer and the crowd cheers after the 3 count, probably because it's all over and they can move on to the next match. After the bout, the crowd starts singing goodbye again and Brock flips the crowd off. He then flips Austin off and he takes a Stone Cold Stunner on his way out the door. Goldberg doesn't get off lightly either. He gets back in the ring to celebrate with Austin. The crowd boos relentlessly as Goldberg shares a few Steve Weisers with the Rattlesnake. And then the crowd goes crazy when Austin hits a stunner on Goldberg. I don't think the match was intentionally sabotaged by both guys, and I don't think they put on a dud on purpose. I do think they couldn't have cared either way though, and they just decided to go through the motions and there wasn't much motivation. They were both leaving, they were both at the end of their contracts, they both got paid, and there was no desire to steal the show. It's amazing when you look at Lesnar versus Angle at WrestleMania 19 and then you look at this right here. And Goldberg was capable of a whole lot more, as evidenced in some of his longer WCW matches. Halloween Havoc 1998 springs to mind. When Goldberg came back to the WWE to face Lesnar again, this WrestleMania match was brought up more than once. Goldberg said he wanted redemption for how he left. He was angry, he was a little bitter, he felt he left on bad terms and he wanted to come back and make it right and do it all again with Lesnar. But as mentioned earlier in the video, the redemption of Bill Goldberg may have went on a little longer than fans would have liked, and it didn't take long for WWE viewers to once again turn on Goldberg. The WrestleMania 20 match though, without a doubt, was a bad way to exit the company, and it did leave fans with a bad taste in their mouths. Imagine being excited for this one too, like I was back in 2004, and imagine thinking the triple threat main event wasn't going to be all that good. Sometimes when you watch this stuff, you gotta go in with zero expectations. That way you can never be disappointed. That'll do it for this one, guys. I'll follow this up down the road with a look at Lesnar vs Goldberg in 2016 and their second WrestleMania match at Mania 33. Thanks for watching and take care.